Hello everyone, I'm Mario and welcome back to my channel. This time I would like to introduce a brand new series that we're going to do in the next 7 videos right after this one. So here I just would like to do a small breakdown of what we're going to do. Here what we're going to do is we're going to start with a very basic idea. So something very random, something very spontaneous, and we are not going to think about topology at all. So we are just going to think about establishing those initial shapes, and then we're going to, only after we have those initial shapes set up, we are going to start to clean up the topology and start to talk some more commonly used modeling tools. So small disclaimer here, this is going to be very beginner friendly training. So we're going to go very slow. So just in case if you're brand new to 3D modeling or brand new to hard surface or simply switching between the softwares, this might be a good introduction just so that we can cover all those very basic modeling tools in combination with, let's say, the basic practices or the general practices that you might find in hard surface modeling. So like I mentioned, we're going to start very simple. So no topology, nothing, just establishing the form and the shapes. And then later on, we're going to start polishing parts one by one. And as we start to do that, we're going to introduce more and more modeling tools so you can see all of the variety in the tools and which one, for example, might be useful for you in the future and where you might use it for what reason and so on. So once we complete the modeling part, we're going to go to rendering part, which again is going to be very basic introduction into rendering. We're going to use Arnold here, which comes as standard with Maya. And we're just going to discuss the general lighting setup, the general material setup, general render settings, and something that can get you results really quick without messing too much with random settings. And then after that, we're going to do exactly the same thing with UV mapping. Just a small, quick introduction into what are UVs, how to approach UV mapping in general, what is going to be important with a model, and basically that is going to be all. So like I mentioned, this video series is going to be very beginner friendly. We're going to go very slow, so videos might be a bit longer. And yeah, so this is it for now, and I'm gonna see you then in the next video. Alright, so I'm gonna start here with a very basic layout. So this is going to be workspace here under general. And I'm going to show you how you can optimize it a bit more just to get more space when you're working, so not everything here is in your way. So let's go here to Windows, UI Elements, and when you hover here on the top, you can click on it to undock, and then now you can decide which of these, let's say, tools you really don't want. So for example, toolbox right here. So if you plan to use, let's say, let me just hover over it. So this is going to be our select tool, this is going to be our move tool, this is going to be our rotate and scale tool. So unless you plan to click on these directly, you actually do not need that. So if you're using hotkeys, then you can hide this. Same thing is going to be the helpline. So for example, helpline is here on the bottom, and it will tell you what each of these functions do. So also if you just hover over them, they will tell you exactly the same thing. So if I remove the helpline, and let me just also move to the sides, let me just close this. If you hover over this, it's going to tell you, for example, which of these each operations is if you just hover and leave the mouse long enough. So let me just do this one more time. Status line. And same thing, let's say with the command line, range slider, time slider. Now shelf, same thing. This is going to be our shelf. Now if you, let's say, if you're not still comfortable with hotkeys, you can use all of these operations, like let's say bevel, extrusion and whatnot. Even let's say if you're not comfortable with marquee menus, you can just leave it up, but for now I'm going to remove that. And status line can stay. We can close this. Now for outliner, you can leave it if you want to, but I have it on a hotkey. So that simply means that whenever I actually need the outliner, I can just call it whenever I want to right here in the middle of the screen. And yeah, basically that is all. If you are satisfied with the workspace, you can just save it as, so save current workspace as, give it, let's say, a name, my custom workspace, something, and that way you will keep it every time when you load in Maya. Alright, so let's now begin to create something, and first things first, I just want to mention all the operations here that we're going to cover, so like extrusion, bevels, let's say sliding, selections. I have extensive series here on my YouTube channel that you can check. It's called Intro to Maya, where we go to each of these tools in depth. So we're not going to cover that now. I'm not going to use that much of hotkeys. We are slowly starting to introduce, but I'm still going to explain, for example, each operation that we use. So we're going to try to go very, very slow, just in case you're brand new to Maya. Same thing is going to apply, for example, if you're switching from Maya to Blender, Blender to Maya, or any other software. This is something that I would recommend to do, for example, practicing on a very, very simple object multiple times. So for example, if you're switching from any other software to Maya or from Maya to Blender, it's going to be exactly the same thing. Just to get familiar with those tools, you can practice on a very, very simple objects like this object that we're gonna create right here. All right, that being said, I just want to address one more question before we begin, and that question is usually like, do I have any kind of idea of what I'm going to create before starting on any project? So especially, let's say, if we're talking about simple stuff, kit bash parts and whatnot, usually I would have a reference, and let's say that I would find something on Pinterest that I would like, and I wouldn't really try to necessarily copy it one by one. I would just kind of analyze it and give it my own take. And that way I would have a lot of freedom on what to do. Also before, let's say I would start, sometimes also I would do sort of like a concept with very, very dirty topology and then clean it up later. So I'm going to show you that as well. So let's say we're trying to create some kind of like hydraulic part, and it's going to be very kind of like cylindrical design type shape. So we're going to start with a cylinder here, and 20 sizes is okay. It doesn't really matter at this point. So I'm just simply hit apply, hit close, and then I'm going to use my scale tool and just give it a bit more size. And from this point on, I will just, again, keep it very, very simple and try to find, let's say, designs or shapes that I think that I might like. So let me also turn the grid here off. It might be a bit distracting. And so let's go to edge mode, double click on the edge mode, and then let's go to bevel. So I'm going to shift right click to call this marquee menu, and let's go to bevel edge. And then again, I'm going to play here with depth. And I'm not sure if you noticed here, I'm just show you this little circle. That simply means that this is now going to be sensitivity of the values. So if I now, for example, go here to fraction, you're going to see that mouse action is going to be super sensitive. If I turn this all the way down, so let's say one part of it all, you will see that now I'm going to have much more smoother transition. So usually I like to keep it a bit higher and then go to Shift, Control, left click, and then I will also have more of a control in between. So it's not going to be that. So for example, this is without Shift and Control, and this is with Shift and Control. So you're just going to have much more control over your angles. So let's say I'm going to leave angle something like this, and let's go to face mode this time. Select all the faces here, and also just make sure that only you're selecting faces that are visible. So to double check on that, let's go to Shift, right click. Actually, I'm sorry, Shift, Control, right click, and then you're gonna have select and then camera based selection. Just make sure that this is checked on. If this is checked off and you're selecting parts, then that means that you might also select something on the back. And if you don't want that, again, Shift, Control, right click, and camera based selection. This is also going to be, I believe, in modeling toolkit. Camera based selection right here is set to on. So let's select that, and I'm just going to push it a bit more down, something like this, let's say. All right, let's again go to the edge mode, double click, and let's go to bevel edge, and I can now scale this a bit down. Let's say fraction, something like this, and that will do. All right, so now I want to copy this, so I'm going to select my move tool, and while holding shift, I'm going to create a clone of this, like so. And the thing is, what I want to do here is I want to delete all the top faces. So I can do it two ways. I can select, so double click here while holding shift to select all the loop, so I can delete this. Or I can simply select this the same way. So click once, and then we're holding shift, double click on the loop, and then go to right click, invert selection and delete. And then I'm going to have only this part left. And now you're going to see, for example, if I hit my move tool, that my pivots or my axis is way up. So I would like to center it in the middle. So in my other way to do this is simply going to hit D, right click and then reset pivot. So you're going to see also here, we're going to have edit pivots function when you hit D and just right click and reset pivot. It's going to snap in the middle, hit D again to confirm, and there we go. So now again, I can scale it down, move it up, and just position it like here. So this might be, let's say, just fine. Let's go to vertex mode, and I'm going to select all the vertices, push them a bit down to say something like this, maybe. Object mode to confirm. And now I would like to copy this part up again. So let's go to Shift and left click. Because the moment when you press Shift and you're hovering over the axis, you're going to see that there's a clone function. And then you can do that. All right, so that's going to be that. And let's go again to vertex modes. And this time I would like to select all the vertices. And you're going to notice that now some of them are not selected. So for that reason, I'm going to again switch to Shift Control, right click, select camera base selection off. And this time I just want to make sure that everything else is selected and push it a bit more up. So slowly you're kind of like building this concept of what we would like to have here, what kind of hydraulic part would be cool here. So something like this maybe. And now what I'd like to do is also here one more piece. So the easiest way to create one more piece here is just to extrude this. And when we're in object mode, let's again just click on it, go to object mode. Let's go to Shift, right click, and then I'm going to use multicut. Now we can use multicut or insert edge loop tool. They both do the same thing differently. Again, if you want to see the difference between both, feel free to check the video on cut tools. It's on my channel, Intro to Maya, and we go both of them in depth. So for now, I'm going to use multicut and I'm going to create a cut while holding Control somewhere around here. And hit Q to confirm the operation. All right, so let's now go into face mode. So right click face mode. And when holding again Shift, click on one face, double click on the rest. And now what we can do is create a duplicate here, because with the duplicate, we can actually now create more geometry here. So let's hit duplicate face. And again, I'm going to do a small offset and local translate and hit Q to confirm. Right click object mode and select. And now we have a new object right here on the top. All right, so let's now extrude this to create more thickness. So while this object is selected, Shift, right click, and then extrude, and simply give it a bit more thickness here. So something, let's say like this, and Q to confirm. Let's go to face mode, and I would like to push this maybe a bit more down and give it a bit more bevel. So let's select this, edge mode, double click, and let's bevel edge. So something, let's say like this, and that will be just fine. So let's go to object mode or simply Q to confirm. Now the thing is, I would like to actually scale it a bit down. So I would like to align these two objects. So let's select both of them and hit Ctrl 1 to isolate our selection. So this also works if you want to select only one object, two selected object, or if you want to only the selections. So right now we want to select in object mode both of these and then Ctrl 1. So now we can push this one a bit more down and simply hit scale and scale it a bit more so that it's matching this top right here. All right, Ctrl 1 to exit, and now we can scale this one a bit more down so that it's matching there on the top. Then we can scale it like this. And there we go. So now we kind of like have a beginning idea of what we're trying to do. Maybe we can scale this one down a bit more. And again, just between scale and move. All right, so let's say that might work. And let me do one more thing. So what we can do here is maybe just to represent something. So let's do a small cut. So again, while in object mode, shift right click and let's go to multi-cut. And while holding control, I would like to create a cut right here. And Q to confirm, let's go to edge mode. And I would like to bevel this. So maybe something like so. Let's go to face mode and simply select the selection and let's go to extrude face, create a small offset and push the thickness on the inside. And let's hit G. So basically in Maya, when you hit G, that means that you will repeat the operation. So you don't have to, let's say, hit Q now to confirm. You don't need to now go to extrude face again. But instead, when you create, let's say, one thickness, hit G, now you'll be able to create that same operation one more time. So let's say something like this will work. All right, so let's say that works. And maybe what I would like to do is in vertex mode, making sure again that my camera-based selection is off, because I would like to select all of the vertices and just move them slightly down a bit. Like so, and then maybe push all this slightly up. And there we go. So as you notice, I'm not using still any kind of support loops. All the operations that we're using are very, very basic. And the only thing that I'm trying to do is here establish a very, very basic shape. So nothing too complex, just something that we can start working on. So you'll see also now that we're going to use some of the intersecting geometry as well. So we are going very, very slow because we're explaining every single operation we do, every single step we're doing. But in reality, let's say if you would be more comfortable with the tools, and if you would be more comfortable with the hotkeys, this would be a very, very fast process. So let's now continue, and we're going to need to, let's say, create now a new cylinder. And now it's the time to explore our options and what we can do. So let's create a new cylinder. It doesn't matter how much size, just for now. And let's again use the scale tool. I'm going to rotate this again, and I'm going to scale it slight bit down because now I'm trying to create sort of like a cap here on the top. And let's go to face mode. And this time I just want to be sure that my camera based selection is off because I would like to select only the front side. And now we can use either the extrusion. So the extrusion will be again extrude faces and create small offset here. So we can do it like that. Or we can do it with the extrusion, with the scale tool, while holding shift and going on one of the axes. So now we can extrude that as well. And let me extrude it maybe one more time. And then push it slightly on the inside and delete this. So now the thing is, what I would like to do is I would like to connect these two edges together. So what we can do is simply double click on the edge, and then go to shift, right click, and we need to bridge these edges together. So bridge is going to be right here. So let's bridge this. So sometimes when this happens, you can play with the twist until all the edges fall into place. Alternatively, if that is not working, you can bridge only two edges like this, and then select all of the edges, deselect the connecting ones, and then run the operation again by hitting G. And there we go. And then Q to confirm the operation. So now we're just thinking ahead and trying to see where, let's say, an opening like this would fit. And you're also going to notice now that we have some irregularities here on the surface, and we can now either soften or harden these edges. So when you go into object mode and select your object, you can shift right click and go to soften harden and either soften or harden the edge. So harden means that now every single edge will appear harder. And if we go to soft and harden, then it's going to kind of balance between the two. If you want to know more about the tool itself, feel free to check the free video here on YouTube as well. It's called Normals or Intro to Normals, where we talk about what each of these tools does. All right, so now we can scale this down a bit. And what I would like to do is go to face mode, hit Q to confirm, and select faces here till here. And just I want to be sure again that we are in proper mode, actually in proper axes, that I get my symmetry back. So I'm just going to rotate because we are working on world X and I'm just aligning it again to the world X. So that means that when I click face here, it's going to be selected on the other side too. So let's switch to the move tool, and again click here once and select where you want to end your loop while double clicking with holding shift, and there we go. So we are now selecting this loop. So click once while holding shift, double click on the next part, and now what we can do is extrude. So I'm going to go to the move tool, and then while holding shift, let's extrude this. There we go. And then let's go into scale tool, and then I'm just going to scale this down like so. And again, move tool. And just in case, let me show you also that, because we are using this quite a lot, UI elements, and if you go to toolbox, you can use move tool, scale tool right here. And if you hover over it, it's going to tell you the hotkey right next. So I have a hotkey set to my custom hotkeys, but if you want to use hotkeys, it's I forgot what the default hotkeys are, but if you hover over these right next to them, there should be a little kind of like sign what the actual hotkey is. So just in case. So I'm going to hide this for now. And let's go to object mode. And again, I just want to scale this down. And now I simply want to play around and see where to fit this in, because I don't want to think about this later when we are establishing all the topology and when you have a lot of loops going on. I don't want to think later where to bring this in. So I'm kind of thinking slowly ahead on how much space do I want to have here, and is this something that I would like to have or not. So for example, let's say that I'm not sure in this design. So let me just push this a bit more lower, let's say like this. Let's say I'm not sure if I'm going to go ahead with that. So what we can do is we can create a duplicate and try one more variation. So let's open Outliner. So I'm going to use my hotkey for this, or you can go to Windows and Outliner right here. So you can see my hotkey for that is Alt plus O. So Alt and O together is Outliner. So I just want to now create a copy here. I have a couple of cylinders. Let me just push this out, and let me also delete the history. And I want to remove every single piece here into a new group. So to create a new group, let's just go to Control G, and that will create a new group. And what I want to do is I want to create a copy of this group. So I would just hold Shift and clone this to the side. And then I'm going to call this, let's say, test 1. And I'm going to call this test 2. All right. So now when we have that, now we are more free to explore different options. So for example, we have here, let's say oval shape, but what if I have something more different? Actually, we can continue from here. And let's double click here, extrude this, even this out, and let's extrude this. So I'm not worried about what the topology looks like here. So while holding again move tool and holding shift, I'm going to extrude this to the side, to go to object mode and maybe scale it down. And I'm going to see maybe how this works. And let's go to edge mode and maybe just move these down like this. So for example, now we can explore and see, let's say between the designs, which one we like more. and which one we would like to explore further. And this is now the point where we can also decide, okay, let's say that I like this one more. So in case that we now want to have a proper topology, and if you want to have everything properly established, now we have more of a clear idea of what we need to do. And especially, for example, if we decide to create, so let me just again double click here for the edge, hold shift, double click here for the edge. And again, we're holding shift, just continue double clicking on the edge. And then let's use bevel. So we need bevel is right here. And let's create more of a bevel. Go to object mode or hit Q to confirm. So let's say if I want to have even more of a bevel, then I just simply need to be careful what kind of topology I'm adding here later down the line. And like I mentioned, since here we are going very, very slow, this is now lasting a bit longer. But in case you're very, very familiar with the modeling tools or the software in general, this can be very, very fast. So if you, let's say, want to do a quick test between, let's say, different types of designs, or this can be either, let's say, go to vertex mode, this can be either higher, this part can be lower. You can now do a lot of testing and just see which one you like the most, and then start working from there. So we can, let's say, clone this again by holding shift over the move tool. We just clone this down, and then let's rotate this and push this here, scale it slightly, and there we go. So now we kind of have more of a clear idea of what we need to do. Now, additionally, what we can do, I can also show you one more thing. So let's say, let's go to face mode here. And what I would like to do is do extrusion. So let's do extrude face, and let's do the offset. And let's push this on the inside and extrude this one more time on the inside. Go to object mode, and let's just scale this so that I don't see these parts. So again, just to reset the pivot, hold the D, reset pivot and hit D again, and then simply scale this up. And then go to object mode, and there we go. So we have, let's say, something like this. Okay, maybe it's a bit too thick. Let's create it thinner. And instead I'm going to select the edge, and then let's bevel the edge. So let's go to shift, right click, bevel edge, and let's say something like this, and then let's go to face mode, and then let's extrude this. So shift, right click, extrude face, add slight thickness, and hit Q to confirm. And then let's go to object mode. Okay, so something like this, let's say, might work. And what we can do furthermore is, let's say, play with some booleans again, just to give us an idea of how something might look like. So let's go to cube. So again, this is going to be shift, right click, selecting the cube. Now the cube is not going to be visible, but if you want to see where the cube is, you can hit control 1, and then if you enable the grid, you're going to see that the cube is actually snapping in the middle of the grid. And any kind of object that you create, it's always immediately selectable. That means that if you hit move, scale, or rotate, you can immediately push it to the side. And then let's say scale it. And let's just remove the grid, and I'm going to scale it down and push to the side. And now what we can do is, let's say, create some tests if we would do some kind of different cuts around this area. So what I would like to do is, let's say, do 3 cuts here. So let's say something like this, 3 cuts, and we're just going to use booleans later to cut this out. So I'm going to push this down. So let's hold, while in move mode, let's hold shift, and then let's clone it once. And then I'm going to hit shift D to clone it one more time, and then we're going to get the same distance. So for example, let me repeat that one more time. If I decide to, let's say, create one, let's say distance here, if you hit shift D, then you will create 1 extra distance there. All right, so now the same thing is, I would like to do it on a different side. So just mirror this on the other side from our central grid. So what we can do is 2 ways. So we can do it one by one. So let's go to shift, right click, and then mirror. And then now we can hit, let's say, Q to confirm the operation, and then simply hit G on the remaining 2. And this will now give us the same result. Alternatively, what we can do is select all three and then go to shift right click and then combine the objects into one. So right now we have one object here. And then when we have one object, then we go to mirror, and simply we need to mirror it on the other side. So for example, if you're not getting the same results like I'm getting here, so these are going to be your settings. So let me just reset the tool. And we're going to select world X and then cut geometry. I think by default, let me just actually see. So, okay, it should be fine. But if you're getting some weird results with cut geometry, usually you need to maybe disable that. And the mirror axis is going to be the axis that you see here pointing your left or right. And then mirror axis position is going to be world. So because we're working in the world center and we are not working related to objects. So again, if you want to know more about mirroring, there is a complete video specific just for that. And that way you're going to get more familiar how the tool works so that we are not wasting that much time here. So let's simply then hit mirror and then hit Q to confirm. All right, so now we're going to have this as a one piece. If I hit Control 1, you're going to see that when we deselect and select, it's going to be selected as one piece. And then we simply need to create quick boolean. So we're going to select this one first, the other one second, and let's go to shift right click, booleans, and then difference A minus B. And there we go. So now we have, let's say, something like this. And I'm going to simply hit Q to confirm the operation, and then go to edit, delete all by type, history to also to confirm the boolean. And there we go. So go to object mode, and I'm going to hide the grid. And this is kind of like the workflow that I would do, let's say, if I would explore some kind of designs before doing any serious, let's say, decisions. If this is something, let's say, the direction that I would like, now what we can do is actually start cleaning up the topology and creating proper shapes. So let's do that next. All right, so now that we have our general design already established, now we're going to need to focus more on the topology and more on edges and how we can actually create this properly. Because so far we haven't really paid attention, is something overlapping or not? Do edges flow properly or not? Does the cylinder have enough subdivisions? And so on. So now when we have sort of like this concept, we need to start thinking about edges a bit more. But first, before we do that, I would like to just hide a couple of things here that maybe we do not need. So for example, this part right here, I do not need for now. So what I would like to do is just make sure that I select everything. So let's turn camera base selection off. So again, this is Shift, Control, right click, select camera base selection. And then let's select everything while in object mode and go to channel box. And just here on display, let's click here, this last icon, and this is going to create a new layer. So that simply means that we can hide or unhide this. And let's call this just backup. Just in case, let's say something goes wrong, we can load this in, but it's also now a good idea to save this. So I'm going to create a new save. So just in case, let's say we want to create, go back, load this file for some reason, we can always come back to this point. So let me create a save here real quick. And there we go, just a quick save on that. And so in case that something is off, we have one backup and we can then always load this file as we go. All right, now we can start thinking in terms of edges. Also, one more thing here. First, maybe what I would like to do is just change the color of this. So as we're working, we're going to add more material. So this is going to be our default material, which is Lambert. So let's go to assign favorite material, actually assign existing material. It's going to be Lambert 1. So this is going to be on right click right here, assign favorite material, assign existing material. And next to Lambert, let's go to this checkbox right here. And let's go then to Lambert 1. And here on the color, I just want to change the color to something different, to something where we can just distinguish it a bit better from the background. So let's say something like this will work. And also what we can do now is apply a different material. and this can be our, let's say, metallic material. So let's go to assign favorite material and assign blend, and I'm gonna quick go and select, and this is going to be, let's say, more of a metallic material, which we're gonna adjust later when we start adding subdivisions. And usually what we're gonna do is we're gonna switch between these two views sometimes, and we're also going to switch between wireframe mode and un-wireframe mode. So I have all that on a hotkey, so I can always switch easily between all these views. So if you're interested to doing the same thing, you need to basically hover over it. So for example, here it says use default material, wireframe unshaded, and textured. So when you go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, Hotkey Editor, I'm gonna already have here my hotkeys. So for example, here it was, I believe, let's say wireframe unshaded or use default material. So use. So toggle use default material, and I have it here, Alt 5 hotkey. Then you're gonna have wireframe unshaded, and this is going to be Alt 6. And these two hotkeys I'm gonna constantly switch between. So basically now you just need to set your hotkeys, click on it here, and then save. And you can decide which hotkeys you want, but it's very convenient if you want to switch between all of these really quick. All right, so let's close this and let's now start thinking about what we can do to clean this up. And the same thing applies. Let's open the outliner. So window, outliner, and I'm gonna create from this second test, just again, make sure that everything is pushed into one group. So what it's not, I'm gonna simply select, hold middle mouse and push it into test 2 group. So now this group is going to be fully selectable and I can clone it to the side. So holding shift, I can create a clone and push it to the side. And this now test 2 becomes our main object. And this we can rename back to test 2. So now we have test 1, test 2, okay, blue pencil, I don't need. And we have main, which is going to be our working object. So this is basically here going to be our reference. And by the reference, we can either hide or see. It really doesn't matter what we want to do. What we can do is also select it all and hit H, and this is going to hide it from the viewport as well. And there we go. So now we can have this close to us if we want to while working on this one. So now we just need to, let me also hide it for now. So now what we need to do is just think a bit more about topology, edges, and everything that comes with that. So we need to sort of plan everything. So that simply means, for example, if we see that we're gonna have this sharp or this bevel here, that simply means that we're going to need to have enough edges coming from the cylinder to support this structure. So in our case, the level of topology that we have here right now, it's not going to be enough. So that means that we either going to need to let's say start low cylinder to establish general shape and then smooth it or subdivide it later to add double more geometry, and then from that point on we are going to then extrude from the cylinder and create this part. So this is going to be, let's say, how we're going to approach this part right here. In addition to that, it also means that this top right here, if I Control-1 to isolate it, this part from the top, let me also camera-based selection turn on, is not, it cannot be like this. We're going to need to have a different type of topology, which is going to be something along these terms. So let's select these two and let's bridge this together. Let's bridge this together by holding G, 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 and G. And then here, G as well, G as well. So just repeating the operation. So we're gonna need something like this instead, where we can actually connect everything in a straight line. And now we can also see a bit better that currently these lines or edges are not aligned to what we need. So that also means that we're gonna need to create a cylinder with matching lines, with matching edges, and then extrude from there. And for example, if I now go into object mode, multicut, and connect this to here. So let me again isolate this. And this is going to connect here on the top. Okay, so this is happening. Let me show you also one more thing. This result is happening simply because we are working with symmetry and Maya needs to have a middle loop. So let's establish middle loop first, and then let's click here, and then right click to confirm. Control 1 to exit isolation mode, Q to confirm, go to object mode. And then we can see the situation where we are in. So now we can either, let's say, leave the cylinder as is, scale this a bit more, so that we actually give ourselves enough room to start working from there. So this part is now solved. Later, so if we say, okay, so we are going to need to have more topology to hold this corner, because right now this corner will need to go somewhere. Right now it doesn't connect to anything. In that case, that simply means we're going to need to have more topology. So that means also that we can, let's say, start with 20, and then later down the line we can smooth it all out, and then with the smooth operation we're going to create more topology for us, and then we're going to have more edges to work with and control the extrusion and control all the shapes. But we're also going to have maybe a bit more freedom about how we want to have these corners. The most important thing is that we match the shape that we want to get, because from the distance, this is kind of like the original concept that we have imagined. All right, if you want to also make yourself, let's say, better visualization, or just to make your life a bit easier, you can also try this. Also sometimes that I recommend, you can try to paint the future edges. So I'm doing this with a mouse, so it's not going to be that perfect, but you can also paint the edges, and let's say what kind of connection you would need around this area to establish, let's say, a clean cut. So let's say one is going to be here, one is going to go there, one is going to go around, and then this one is going to need to continue here. And since we're going to need to have support loops, we're going to need also something like this. And once you know this, so once you can visualize edges for yourself, you're already ahead, because you know what kind of topology waits for you, and you can always be prepared for that. And once you have that, then it's easy. Everything after that comes easy. So in our case, for example, if we now, let's say, draw this type of topology here, that now means that this edge, it's not going to be sharp enough. So that also means that if you want to have a sharp edge, we're going to need to have two more edges here. So one here and one here. And the only way to have these edges sharp, that means they will need to be controlled on the cylinder. And since cylinder, we cannot add edges the way we want to, cylinder will need to have fixed edges. That now simply means that in order for us to have this edge right here sharp, this edge right here, if we want to have it sharp, that means that this is going to be the general distance between the sides and the cylinder that we're going to need to establish. So each cylinder side is going to need to be this distance. And that kind of like gives us an idea how much sides do we going to need to have on the cylinder eventually. We don't need to necessarily start there, we just need to end there eventually. And what I mean by start there, let me just also clear this all, it means that if we, let's say I have a cylinder, just a quick example to demonstrate what I mean here is that we can start low level cylinder, and then later we can smooth the cylinder and get more subdivision from there. So we can here establish all the general shapes that we need, and when we think that we are done, that we need more topology, more let's say shapes, then we're going to continue to more topology, and that will now give us enough room to create all the forms that we want to. So if you want to again play it perfectly safe, we can select these parts. So let's go to duplicate face, So now we're going a bit faster here. And let's Control 1 to isolate this, go to edge mode, and I'm gonna hit scale and just extrude it on the inside. Because what I'm trying to do here, let me do a quick bevel. We are basically trying to simulate exactly the same thing. We are just going to smooth this real quick, just to see, will we have enough topology to hold this corner. So this was, let's say, 20 subdivisions, and this is now 40 subdivisions. And if you remember, now what was the distance before what we established there, that we need to have this corner sharp. So 40 might not be enough. We started with 20. We can start now when we're creating this form around 28 sides, or maybe even 24. 24 also may be just enough to give us enough topology to maintain this shape right here at the corner. So now again, two-way street is that we can start actually from here. This can be our beginning. And basically what we can do from here is just start extruding the form, start extruding the shape, and basically creating that same cylinder from the beginning. This is also part of the possibility, or we can start from the beginning with the cylinder of 24 sides. So it now really depends which approach we want to take. But I believe that here we're going to just start from the beginning, and we're going to push this to the side. And now we have more clear idea what we want to do. Just in case, let's say we are not sure about the distances, we can keep it again to the side to know which distance to take. But yeah, I hope that now kind of clears it a bit further on. So this is now regarding the top. Regarding the sides, it's going to be exactly the same thing. So regarding the sides, if you now know, for example, that you're going to have these details here, you can also help yourself and try to visualize where those edges might be. So let's say we're going to have an edge here, an edge here, an edge here. And if you want to contain this sharpness, that means that we cannot have, let's say, widely spread edges. So let's say we're going to have an edges like this. And if we have widely spread edges, let's say like this, that means that this corner is not going to be sharp. And if we planned what we planned at the beginning, that we're going to need to have more topology to establish the top shape, that also simply means that the topology that we add later might be enough to actually hold this shape in place. So we can also delete this and delete that. And let me also undo this actually. And there we go. And everything else, I think it's pretty straightforward. It's only kind of like these two parts that are going to be problematic. But whenever you kind of find yourself in a situation that you're not sure where to begin, where to start, or how to progress through the designs, just make sure to kind of visualize that for yourself if you can. I will throw this as a small reminder. Even here on YouTube, we have a intro to understanding topology. So if you want to, you can go through that series, and it might just give you a bit more of idea of what we're going to talk in the next video. Okay, so let's now begin by adding a new cylinder. And again, what we can do is try to test which, let's say, size is going to fit the best. So let's say 20, this is 20. We started with cylinder with 20 sides. We can now do maybe 24 and see if that works. So let's go to create a new cylinder, and let's select this little checkbox and go here to axes, divisions, and set 24, hit apply and close. I'm going to immediately hit my scale tool and just try to push it here on the top, Control 1 to isolate, and I'm going to do exactly the same quick test. So let's go to edge mode, double click the edge mode, hit scale tool, extrude on the inside, and maybe push it a bit more to the top, to the bottom, and I'm going to bevel this just real quick, and let's Control 1 to isolate, go to object mode, smooth, just in case we decide to smooth this later. I want to see will we have enough topology to hold. All right, so this might be just enough to hold this shape, let's say nice and smooth. And so we might actually go with that. So let's go a couple of steps back. And this is going to be, let's say, our beginning. So we can now do just match everything, and we don't need to now match absolutely everything, but we can have our just beginning there. And the thing is, I also want to maybe now delete this part because we don't really need it anymore. Because if you want to, you can unhide the previous one with. So when you select something with H, you can hide, and Control Shift H, you will unhide. And maybe just put it closer just for the sake if you want to align everything. So now I'm going to show you something else. If you go to side view while holding space, you're going to see, let's say, the frontal view. And let me just disable the grid. What we can do now is we can actually match the sizes. So let's go to vertex mode. And this time I want to be sure that camera based selection is off, so that when I'm selecting vertices, I can select all of them and there is no remaining. So just in case you see something like this, that means you forgot to select something. So let's go to select camera based selection on. So now when you're in move mode and when you hold V, you can actually click here on various points where you would like that this, let's say, move height stops. So if I just hover on this point right here, it's going to stop there and align perfectly, or go up or go here. It really doesn't matter. And the same thing down. Select everything while in move mode, hold V. This is going to be a hotkey for snapping to points. It's going to be right here. So you can enable, disable, but if you'll see, if I toggle V, it's going to be on and off. So holding V, and I'm going to just come all the way here down to the bottom. And that way you can align everything perfectly to whatever, let's say, you created. All right, let's hit space, go with your mouse here on the top and hit space again. That way we can go back to our main viewport. All right, so now when we are in the main edge here on the top, what we can do is actually, no, let me go back, hit space one more time, hit space here again. And I want to actually align everything here with this top area. So here, this top level, because we need to bevel this out. So let's go to edge mode. And then now what we can do is we can hit scale tool, and while holding shift, I can extrude on the inside. And while everything is still selected, you can also go to edge mode if you want to, and then go to control right click, convert it all to vertices, and then shift right click and then go to merge vertices and then merge vertices to center. And this is a quick way how you can, let's say, close the hole from the top. And let's go to edge mode, double click on the edge and create that beveled edge. So let's say something like this. It doesn't have to be perfectly matched, but again, let's say just enough for something like this. Hit Q to confirm. All right, so now what we can do next is we can create new cut here. So let's go to multi-cut while in object mode. So multi-cut while holding control, I'm going to create, let's say, a cut somewhere around here. It really doesn't matter, because if we again hit space, hover your mouse into side view, hit space again, we can go ahead easily into edge mode. And again, just while holding V, we can align it to exactly where we want to have it. So there we go. Now let's now do a bevel. Let's do a whole fraction. And let's say something like this. Hit Q to confirm. Let's go to face mode, click once and double click to create a loop while holding shift. And let's do now extrude faces. And slowly now I'm going to start using hotkeys. So for every of these operations, I have a hotkey. And let's now push this on the inside like so and hit G one more time. And if this is going now super far on the inside, what we can do also is delete or just leave it as it is. It really depends. If it's not visible, then we can also delete that, because later this part is going to be hidden in the shadows. So now what we can do is actually add proper support loops. So let's click here once, click here twice while holding shift. And again, while holding shift, just select all of these while double clicking. And then let's do bevel edge. And this time chamfer is going to be set to on. And now when we hit 3 on our keyboard, we're going to get a smooth preview. And this just means that we're going to actually see how our edges look like. So from 1 to 3, we're going to toggle and see our smooth preview. So that means now that on top and here at the bottom, we're also going to need to have support loops. All right, hit Q to confirm that operation. And let us go to side view one more time. Select the vertex mode and make sure again camera base selection is off, because I want to select all of the vertices and just double check that we are right here at the bottom. All right, so let's go to double click on the edge mode. And then this time I'm going to use my hotkey. This is going to be for me Control B to create this bevel. Hit Q to confirm. Go to edge mode, double click here, holding shift, double click here. And again, Control B to create a bevel. And I believe that Control B might be a default hotkey for bevel. And again, to double check, if you're not sure about the hotkeys, Windows, Settings, Preferences, Hotkey Editor, and then you're going to go here to bevel. And you're going to see what hotkey is. So bevel is Control B, extrude is going to be Control E. Okay, let me go to edge and let's select these two and also create bevel and chamfer off, because we need those support loops, small fraction, and hit 3 or Q to confirm the operation. And there we go. So let's now also turn off the grid. And this is going to be now our clean. If we again toggle between 1 and 3, we're going to see our smooth preview. And now we have a clean bevels here. Now let's go and check the textured version, or the texture with the material actually. Apply our blend. And now we can go actually to our attribute editor. And let me actually delete the history. So let's go delete all by tab, because now you notice we have here a lot of these operations. So everything that we've done, it's going to be stored in your history. We can go to edit and then delete all by type in history. So you're going to have delete by type and delete all by type. Delete by type means simply that you're going to delete the history only on a selected object, and delete all by type is going to be deleting history for everything in the scene. And you also notice here I have it on a hotkey. It's set to 2. So that means that every single time when the scene becomes a bit heavy, I simply hit 2 and I don't need to go to edit, delete history every single time. All right, so let's go to a material and click select here. And now we can actually give it a bit more color. So what I like to do is just give it a bit more tones. So it's more, let's say, gives a bit more contrast between the background and whatever I'm working on. So let's say something like this, maybe a bit more bluish. So maybe 0.2 and basically like that. But I'm going to show you my preset. So I have here basic, and we can maybe increase the tone a bit more, just so that we have more contrast between the gray background and our objects. And there we go. So feel free to play with these settings. All right, and now like I mentioned, we're going to constantly toggle between the two, because the thing is, sometimes what I like to check often is how something is looking on a very, very metallic surface. So what kind of bevels are we getting? What kind of highlights are we getting? Is everything super clean or not? But the thing is, these cylindrical objects are pretty simple in terms of highlights, so we're not going to get any weird distortions, I hope. So that's the reason why sometimes you want to switch between, let's say, Lambert, which is more clean, and more of a highlight material. All right, so our next step is going to be now establishing this top. And like we mentioned before, the top, we need to have a different set of topologies. So Control 1 to isolate the object, and to clean the topology here on the top. I just want to select here everything, but again, making sure that camera-based selection is on. So I'll just select the top and delete the top. And then also what we can do, so we can do this two ways. Let me also enable my symmetry again. So Shift, Control, right-click Symmetry. And let me just see where the middle is. So here, just to see in reference to the grid. What we can do here is bridge. So Shift right click, bridge. And also what we can do is select everything and Shift right click, fill hole. So we can do both. It really doesn't matter. If you do, let's say, bridge like this, and then simply continue doing G, you're maybe going slightly faster. So let's select everything, hit G. Or if you decide to do other way around, so with the fill hole option, so you would select everything, go to Shift right click, fill hole, and then simply what you would need to do is use multicut. So let's say we go to multicut, and now we need to simply connect all the points manually. So we can do it again with multicut, or let's go to vertex mode, selecting, let's say, 2 vertices, and then go to connect components. And then we just simply start connecting the points like this, or with the multicut creating cuts. It's really now just the preference, whatever you feel like. So we're gonna need to have a cut here, and then just continue creating cuts. Another thing is, for example, now with the multicut, you're not sure what the center is, but if you hold Shift and Control while in multicut, you'll be able to create a perpendicular cut like so. Probably going to notice that we're going to close a lot of stuff in a triangle. So this is not a problem now. So let me just continue. So connect, right click to confirm, and I think this is fine. So it's not really that much of a problem that we connected now in the triangles, because later when we subdivide, triangles will get fixed, and we can also, if we want to get rid of the triangles, we can close them like this. But for now, I'm just going to leave them as they are. Or also, if we want to, we can just delete the parts that are creating, let's say, the triangles. And then let's say you're going to have a quad in this area. But for this case, I think it doesn't really matter much. All right, so now when we have that set, we would need to also think about, let's say, about the edge flow. So if, let's say, we decide to extract this part right here. So select this part, and let's say we extrude this. So how the edges are going to behave when we subdivide that. So we can also be prepared for that. So in order for us to be prepared, what we can do is simply create here an edge loop with the multicut and just see what kind of highlight we will get later down the line. So for example, if this is enough of a highlight, then this is going to be, let's say, just fine. So now we have, let's say, one loop going here, and then these two loops are going to be our structural edges. Actually, this is going to be a structural edge, and these are going to be our support loop. So let me do it this one more time. So this structural edge and these two are going to be support loops, giving us this highlight on the side. All right, so we're kind of getting more and more prepared for that. Let me undo. All right, so now we also have a bit more of a play room where we can decide maybe we would like to do something different. So let's say that we would like to extract all of this. So maybe let's do one more extrude on the inside. So small offset. And then let's go to move tool, and then we're holding Shift, extrude this on the top. So right now we're going to get a bit more different shape. So this is kind of like, we don't have to stick to this 100%. It's just to give us an idea of the direction where we want to go and what kind of effects we want to get. So if this is also working fine, we can just leave it as it is and start to, let's say, explore different shapes, what we can get from there. Because I think it's also working fine, because we're going to have a nice flow with the surface on the side. So we can also maybe leave it like that as well, and then explore different options what we can get out of that shape. All right, so let me also push it a bit more up. So I'm gonna undo this until the point where I have this top selected. All right, so let's go to the side view. And here what I would like to do is just match this height. So let me just see, because later we're gonna have a circle here, and I think that I like the definition of the circle there. So here it's going to be, let's say, the correct height. There we go. Okay, another thing maybe we can do is, let's say, disable symmetry, go to scale mode, and then maybe scale it on this axis and see what kind of result we get there. Scale it on this axis, see what kind of result we get there. So we can get a lot of interesting looking forms just by, let's say, playing with the scale tool and trying to get more of a dynamics in the shapes. Because sometimes when you have, let me just undo this part. Sometimes when you have, let's say, too straight of a line, that can be a bit boring, and it's not catching the highlights as good, let's say, as you would have with more, let me just redo this part, with more angular areas. So we might explore that as well. So at least maybe some small angle here and small angle there, but just making sure that symmetry is disabled. Resetting the scale tool, but hitting it again. And it doesn't have to be any huge angle, just a little bit to destroy that curvature. Actually, to destroy or to avoid this flat angle. So let's say that this might work for us. All right. And let's see also what we can do on the top. So for example, the top right now is also very flat. So if you look from this area, it's very flat. We are going to get nice curvature all around, but let's see what we can do with the top. So the first things first, what I would like to do again, just undo until this top is selected. Go to face mode. Actually, I want to show you one more thing again, selection wise. You can also go, let's say, into the, let me just isolate this. And if you want to select, let's say, quick faces, you don't have to click on it while holding shift. You can also hold tab. Let's say now we're going to need symmetry. You can hold tab and just paint your selection like this. And then everything you want, you can just paint it out. And the thing is, what I want to do here, I just want to delete this, because maybe what we can do also is some cuts on the side, or maybe what we can select it all, and again, disable symmetry for now, hit the scale tool, and maybe just scale this up, and maybe push it more on the upside, scale it in, and maybe push it on the inside, and then scale it on the inside. And just, I don't know, create some more interesting looking forms here on the top, or just maybe leave it as it is. So let me just undo, leave it as it is. Let's go to multi-cut in the object mode. Multi-cut is going to be here. Let's say create cut, Q to confirm, go to face mode. And again, just trying to improvise on the spot. Let's hit scale tool and maybe holding shift and extrude on the inside. And we're just trying to find, let's say, positions or places that we can break that surface. So let's say that something like this we might like, but it's too early that we do this because we are going to need to have more topology for that. But it's just a good idea to experiment in every stage, let's say, of the development, and then we know what kind of situation waits for us and what kind of topology should we need there, and be more prepared. All right, another good habit is, for example, cleaning up the edges. So for example, this is not that bad, but in case that we're going to need to have, let's say, more cleaner topology later, I would just like to clean this edge. So that means that I'm going to use multi-cut. So let's go to object mode, shift right click, multi-cut, and just straighten this out while holding, let's say, shift and control to give me this perpendicular cut here. and double click here, and then we're going to control delete. Just make sure you control delete instead of delete, because if you just hit delete, the vertices will stay. But if you hit control delete, then you're going to delete the vertices as well. So let's do the same thing on the other side. Right click to confirm, Q to confirm, go to edge mode, double click here, and then control delete. All right, now what I'd like to do is create a small bevel here. So let's do a bevel and chamfer on, actually chamfer off. And there we are. And I think the curvature or the support loop is going to be just okay there. And the same thing here. It's a very, very good habit just to start cleaning these edges that are maybe a bit too curvy. So again, just quick multi-cut, delete this one and control delete this one. Again, make sure in your object mode, select multi-cut with shift and right click. And again, shift and control to create this perpendicular cut. Shift and control, perpendicular cut. Delete, double click, and then holding shift, double click again, and then control delete. And now the top is also very clean. All right, so let's now continue. And now what I would like to do is we're going to need to have more topology here in the middle. So let's go to object mode, shift right click, multi-cut. And if you middle mouse click while holding control, so let's say holding control in multi-cut, you're going to see that you're going to get this cut line preview. If you hold shift and control, you're going to get this 10-step interval. If you hold in control and middle mouse click, you will get the middle cut. So let's add then this 3 middle cuts. And basically these 3 middle cuts are just creating a space for this opening in the middle. And also one more important thing, for example, if we now subdivide preview this, so let's hit 3 hotkey, you're going to see what is happening with this support loop. You see where it's going all the way down. And same thing this one, it's going all the way down. So this is kind of like stretching that we don't want to have, and for that reason we're also going to add more support loops in the middle. So let's go do that. So let's go to shift right click, multi-cut, and while holding control, let's just keep adding here loops while holding. So again, just to repeat, with multi-cut active, so shift right click, multi-cut, and while holding control, you're going to middle mouse click, and you're going to get this central loops. And this is going to be, let's say, just enough for now. We can continue doing this more, because ideally what we're trying to do is create this squares everywhere, and that just simply means that our topology is going to be much more easier to control later down the line when we're adding, let's say, these cuts, because right now it's going to be a bit too early. We want them smaller, and we're kind of limited to this size. And if you want to have smaller cuts, then just means that we're going to have more topology necessary later down the line. All right, so I think that we are done for the top right now. So this is the maximum that we can get. So the only thing now that I would do is I would create the copy. Actually, not yet. We're going to create a copy maybe later when we do the top, and then middle is going to be relatively easy. So we're going to close it here, and then let's continue later when we're going to need to subdivide. So make sure that you save this, and then from the next save, we're going to start creating more and more topology and creating these shapes and the details on the top, and then details on the side as well. All right, so our next step is going to be adding more topology to this object. So you might ask yourself, why is this necessary? Why do we need this? Or isn't this enough topology for whatever we are trying to do? So usually what we are trying to do is, for example, maintain the curvature of the cylinder by, let's say, adding smaller and smaller details. And the smaller the detail on an object means simply that you're going to need more topology to maintain that detail. So whenever you see, let's say, a very, very tiny detail on a cylinder, that means that the topology surrounding that detail is going to need to be more denser, let's say, than what we have. So for example, right now, if we would try to do a similar effect, so let me try to demonstrate. So if I select these parts right here, and let's go to extrude. So extrude face, let's create an offset and let's delete this because I would like to create similar effect now without booleans. So we're going to select these two edges. So select one, hold shift, select the other, and then let's go to bridge. Now we're going to select the rest and then fill hole, and then again double click here, shift right click, fill hole. And the thing that we need to do here now is connect these edges. But before we connect these edges, I would like to select everything here, again holding shift, selecting these three, and I want to do a bevel face. Now the reason why I do this, not bevel, I'm sorry, I'm going to do extrude face here and do a small offset. The reason why I do this is I want to create the support loop, and it's going to be much easier when the edges are open than when we are actually having a lot of edges going around. So let's now connect all these edges. So select this one, and let's go to connect components, connect this one and this one, hit G. And let's do here on the top two, select this one and holding shift this one, shift right click, connect components, this one and this one, hit G, and there we go. So now what we can do is go to object mode, shift right click, multi-cut, and we're holding control middle mouse click to create mid loop. And there we go. And let's create one more here, and that's going to be enough. And then simply connect these, right click to confirm, connect these, right click to confirm, right click to confirm, and same thing on the top. So just right click to confirm everything. And now we have all these edges connected with all the proper edge loops, and then Q to exit multi-cut operation, and right click, go to object mode, hit 3 to subdivide preview, and there we go. So this is now going to be, let's say, the detail that we can have based on the surrounding topology. There's nothing much more that we can do. We can now try and struggle and add the edges. I don't know, we can try to redirect this. The one thing you cannot do is add edges like this to a cylinder. One thing we cannot do, because we are now ruining the integrity of the cylinder. And if you switch to our preview with more of a metallic texture or metallic material, you're going to see what is actually happening on the cylinder. So these edge loops right here we do not want. So we're going to need to undo all of that, and now we can actually see that this is not working for us at the moment. So let me undo everything, and now we are back at the beginning. Now that doesn't mean that we need to follow this rule for every single, let's say, part that we are trying to do. So let's say that we are satisfied with some kind of curvature. Let's say that we decide to create a detail right here. So I'm going to select scale tool, and I'm holding shift. I'm going to extrude this on the inside, and let's do one more extrusion. So let's go to extrude face, create a small offset, and let's go to then Q to confirm, object mode, shift right click to multi-cut, and simply we're holding control, create a small support loop there. Hit Q to confirm, right click to object mode, and 3 to preview, and again just click away to smooth preview it all. So now we can actually see, let's say, if this is now the curvature that fits us, we can actually do this detail here. Because later, let's say when we have more topology, that simply means that, let me also demonstrate really quick, more topology is going to look like this. That simply means that the corner here is going to be much more sharper. So now it's the question, do we want to have a sharper corner here? Or do we want to have a smoother corner here? If you want to have a smoother corner, that means that we are going to create this detail now. And then once we add smoothness or more subdivision, then we're going to preserve this curvature while having more topology. And that's why we're going to do it early. In case, for example, that this is too smooth for us, we are going to then add more divisions and then create a proper, let's say, detail here when we have more edges and have more of a sharper corner. But another question is now also, do we actually like, I'm not sure if I can do it again. Let me do it like real quick here. Another question is going to be also, do we like, let's say, this line right here? Do we want actually that this is under an angle, or do we want that this is more of a straight line? So this is now the question that we kind of need to know ahead of time. So for example, if I don't like that curvature, what I would need to do is I would need to select these parts where I don't like the curvature. I would like to have this more of a straight line. So that means that I will go into my scale tool and while holding shift and control. So shift will give you extrude, but if you hold shift and control, that will give you slide. So that means we can just slide this into position to get a straight edge. So we can do the same thing on the different side. So shift, control, and then left click, slide. And now, if we select these two parts, and if we create a detail, now we're going to have more of a straight line here. It's not going to be, it's no longer going to be that much on a crazy curvature. So that also means if we do it here, and later when we subdivide, so add more smoothness or subdivision, that means that that curvature will be maintained, and maybe slightly we're going to need to adjust that. And there we go. So now we also prepared for that. So just make sure at this point that you create a save, because everything that we are creating from this point on, we're going to add more and more topology. And when we add more topology, then it's going to be that much harder to come back. So I think now we are done with this, and let's simply now select our object and then go to shift right click, smooth. And let me just go here one more time, just in case. Let's go to edit, reset settings. So just so we are sure that we all have the same settings. So you're going to have edit, reset settings, and just leave it everything as is. Hit close, and then let's go to smooth. So again, shift, right click, smooth. Q to confirm, right click to object mode, click away, and there we go. So now we are having a lot of topology here, and now we have a lot of room to play around with and add all these minor details, add these cuts on the inside, and add all the extra details on the top. So we have a lot of room to play. The key here is preparation. You don't want to go too early into this kind of topology, because you might find yourself stuck and that you cannot manipulate some shapes, some forms that could be easily manipulated before. So that's why it's always kind of good to have a small breakdown of whatever you're creating first before continuing into anything complex. So let's now continue, and now we need to create a few things. So we need to first create a circle, and let's select all of these parts, and let's try to simply find something that it's working. So for example, I would like to do the same thing on the back side. So we have two options. One of them is enabling symmetry on the axes where we have our selection. So if you go to the side, this is going to be now Z axis. And if we change from world X to world Z, now whatever we select here is going to be selected on the other side as well. Just in case, for example, that we're working on one axis, like this. Let me actually show you what I mean. So let me actually switch to Z axis. Let's select everything here, here. Or holding tab, we can just quickly paint the selection we maybe want. all the way here. And maybe also this part right here. I just want to see till where do we want to have our circle. I think this might be fine. Also, what we can do is you can now remove all the edges and then kind of reposition them properly, but I think this will be fine. So let's say that I now do the extrusion. So let's do shift right click, extrude face, offset. And then let's say for some reason you forgot or by accident remove the symmetry and you totally forgot what's happening on the other side. And now we select all these parts and we circle these components, go to radial offsets. And let's say now we create a circle. But the thing is, on the other side, something now went off and we don't have a circle. So you actually do not need to undo this. You don't need to undo and do the same thing on the other side. What you can do is actually project this on the other side using vertices and making sure again that camera-based selection is on this time, because what we want to do is we want to select all the vertices here that are different. So let's say all this here, we want to project on the other side. So there is a tool for this. If you go to Edit Mesh and then Symmetrize, that simply means that now you're going to select a mesh edge for symmetry. So this is going to be our middle. And then you're going to see that the moment you do that, what's happening on one side is going to project on the other as well. This sometimes may happen when, for example, you disabled symmetry for some reason. And then when you realize that when you enable it, it's not really the same thing what you wanted to do. So it's kind of like handy little tool. All right, so now when we have all of this, let me just enable symmetry on Z. So again, making sure that everything is selected. We can now create a proper looking circle here. Select everything. And let's do now scale, extrude on the inside. And I'm going to push it on the inside. And also scale and just scale on one axis, this one, because I would like to have more of a straight looking opening. Pushing it on the inside like so, and then we can simply delete. And now let's go to the edge mode, double click here and simply shift right click and then bridge these two parts together like this. Hit Q to confirm, right click to object mode, and then simply 3 to preview and click away to get that smooth preview. All right, so now what we need to do is add supports. So double click, shift to double click to select the rest. And let's go to bevel edge, chamfer, and there we go. So now you're going to notice one thing is that the bevel is going to have a very, very limited spacing. So that also means that we are going to need to adjust a few things. So I like to do also, especially when circles are in question, just to adjust these points a bit more, like this to the side. So again, selecting a point and then shift control to slide. So we can just organize this a bit better to have more of a proper curvature there. So let's say something like this will be enough. So you can really now spend a lot of time kind of like organizing a bit more. But okay, let's go to edge mode. So select these and again, then just bevel edge, chamfer off, and give it enough fraction. Q to confirm, object mode, and with between switching 1 and 3 hotkey, we are just previewing how everything is looking so far. And there we go. Okay, let's now continue. Now we can do the detail, let's say here on the side that we wanted. And just in case, let's say that the edges that we planned are not as straight anymore, I'm just going to switch to symmetry here and straighten it one more time. So again, shift control and slide. Shift control and slide. Okay. Just double check, was that? Yes, that was it. and this should be world X. So for example, now you also notice that what I selected here, okay, it is selecting. Okay, so I thought maybe I missed something. And maybe till here. Okay, let's now extrude. So extrude face, because we're gonna need one support loop here before we do the rest. So this might be enough. And then let's hit scale tool, and we're holding shift, let's extrude on the inside. And now what we can do is play with the move tool. We can push this maybe a bit more down if we want to. We can, I don't know, keep it a bit more up, push it like here, and just find maybe interesting looking shape dynamic for an interesting looking detail. And let's go extrude face, small offset, like that. And now we're gonna need to Q to confirm and go to multicut to create the remaining support loops. Hit Q to confirm, 3 to preview, and go to object mode, and there we go. So now we have a clean detail on the top. All right, so let's now continue. Now we're going to need to do these sides right here. And now it really doesn't matter, do they perfectly align? So we can just kind of eyeball it from where exactly that would be. So let's say from here. So maybe from here till here. The thing is, we can always, like if we're not sure, let me also show you that. So we can detach this. So let's go to, let's say, select the middle. And then let's go to shift right click and then detach. That simply now means if we go to face mode, that's okay. So we still need to do the middle here. So let me again choose multicut while holding control, middle mouse click, and that will give us the mid loop. And then we can double click the mid loop, shift right click, detach components, go to face mode, and then select both sides. And then this side we can actually delete. The reason why we're doing this is that we can then work only on one half till middle, and I'm not really concerned as that will something go beyond the middle point. Also, what we can do right now, this is a singular object. We can also go one step further and detach the top from the bottom, and then we're going to have two objects. So the way we do that is shift right click and go to extract faces, and simply hit Q to confirm, right click to object mode, and now you'll see that we're gonna get two objects right here. And yeah, so let's now see where we can place these parts. So let's say somewhere till here, and then let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 till here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 till here. So let's say something like this. Let's go now to extrude face, small offset, and we're going to delete this. So basically we are doing this small offset to give us that extra support loop. And then we're going to delete this because we're going to bridge this later. The only thing we also need to remove is this part right here, because this is something we do not need, so we can remove that. Also, now you notice one thing. Oops, let me show you one more thing here. Control 1 to isolate, is that now we're going to have this little cut here in the middle. It's not big of a problem, because when we now mirror this on the other side, we are just going to kind of like weld this in the middle. So let's do shift right click in object mode, and let's go mirror. And then just make sure again that we are offsetting, actually that the axis is set to Z, because this is going to be the axis from the mirror, and that the axis position is set to world. And since we are in the world center, that is going to be aligned. And now notice that here in the middle, everything is also going to snap. So let's just hit Q to confirm, go to object mode, and there we are. So now the only thing that it's left here is to bridge these pieces together. So let's go to edge mode and select this part, and then let's go to bridge, select this one and this one, hit G to repeat the previous operation, this one and this one, hit G, and there we go. So Now we need to fill hole here. So let me also maybe switch it to our Lambert view. Shift right click, fill hole, and let's just confirm with the G on every single piece here. There we go. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to arrange proper topology. So I'm going to show you here on one, because exactly the same process is going to be on because exactly the same process we're going to repeat on the remaining two. So let's go to vertex mode, and same as before, we need to first establish the support loop. Same thing what we have on the outside, we need to now establish on the inside as well. So let's go to extrude face, small offset, hit Q to confirm, and now we can go into vertex mode and connect all these vertices. So this is going to be connect components, and we're just going to hit G and repeat. Actually, we don't need this one, and let's do the same thing here on the top. So we can just continue doing it like so, and then let's go into object mode. Let's go to multi-cut, create a cut in the middle, go to vertex mode, and then do the remaining connections. So create one cut here, one cut there. Actually, it's connecting here. And there we go. So now we have more of an appropriate, let's say, distancing for this detail right there. And let's now continue doing the same thing here at the bottom. But the thing is, now I'm going to show you something else. Instead, let's say repeating the same operation, what you can do is, let's say, select this loop, go to right click, and then detach. And then you can go to, let's say, face mode, delete this, go here, do the same thing, detach, select the face, and then delete. Because we have everything so organized, now what we can do is, again, detach here, and go to face mode, select this, and then we can extract these faces. And again, what we are now doing is creating the separate object out of this. And then basically what we can do is just duplicate it here and connect everything together. So let's go to move tool, and while holding shift, I'm going to clone this. But the thing is, I would like to align now this together. So in order for us to do that, what first we need to do is align the pivot to the point. And you can do that by simply hitting D, and then align here. It's going to say align, and just click there and hit D again. And now you can move it from this point. And if you remember, we have snapping enabled with V. And if you hold V, you will just be able to snap here on the top. And if you go to, again, shift, clone, now we can just repeat the same operation and snap it right here. So now we have quick solution here, and just skipped all that kind of like dirty part. And now the only thing that we need to do is kind of like stitch it all back together. The problem is that now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. Actually, we have 4 pieces, and we need to select here everything. And once everything is selected, make again sure to combine it all together. So select everything, and then go to shift, right click, combine. And now again, everything is going to be one object. The only problem is there's going to be this thick line shown, and that just simply means that the connection here is still not finished. Because when you subdivide this, or when you decide, let's say, to move a face, camera-based selection is on. I just want to show you this. You're going to see that these parts are not actually connected. So this thick line simply means that the parts are still open and that the edges are not connected. In case you do not see this thick line, go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, and here under, I believe, Polygons, simply highlight border edges. This needs to be checked on, and then you can put, let's say, edge width something like 4, then it's going to be really, really visible. So border edges, and set a value of 4 and simply save. And I think you're going to need to either reload the file or maybe reset Maya to see this, but it's really useful because it helps to know which edge is actually open. So to make our lives easier, we're just going to, right now it's going to be a bit tricky to go ahead and select every single point manually. So instead what we're going to do is just click on one face, shift, and then double click on the neighboring face to select all the loop, and do the same thing here. And when we have all the neighboring edges to the vertices selected, we can go to Control, right click, and then convert this selection to vertices. And now everything that it was selected previously as a polygon is now selected as a vertice. And then what we can do is stitch vertices that are open together. And to do that, we simply need to go to Shift, right click, merge vertices, and then here merge vertices. And then you're going to notice you're going to get this distance threshold, which is usually fine, and it's just going to connect every open vertice together. And now we need to repeat the same process here. So control right click to vertices, and then merge vertices, and continue for everything else. To vertices, shift right click, merge vertices. Q to confirm. Actually, not edges, to vertices, merge. And there we go. So small workaround. All right, so let's save this, and then let's continue in the next project file. We're going to just transfer this at the bottom, create the middle, and then maybe see what else can we do to make this part a little bit more interesting. Okay, let's now continue, and we're going to now create this bottom part. So this and this part right here, this one we're going to save for the end, just in case, let's say we want to create this one slightly more interesting, and then we can just copy the finished part at the very bottom. But this one, these two are going to be pretty much straightforward. So let's now continue to this area right here, and I'm going to isolate this, and you're going to notice now we have a lot of polygons here that maybe we don't actually need. So it's kind of rule of thumb that whatever you're not showing, so whatever it's not going to be rendered, or whatever it's not going to be visible render, you can safely delete, and you don't have to model that, because you're just wasting kind of like space. And for example, this doesn't need to really exist, because we have two intersecting pieces, and it's just extra geometry that it's adding to poly count, which is really not necessary. So I'm going to turn the symmetry off for now, use my scale tool, and just push this on the inside to create a small little offset. Go to Move tool, hold Shift, and then extrude it slightly to the top, just so that we have sort of like this minor opening. And from this opening, we're going to create this little detail right here. So same like before, what we're going to do is select this face, and actually select one, and then Shift left double click. So Shift left double click, and this is going to be our duplicate face. So we're going to create additional faces from this selection. So Shift right click, duplicate face, and then let's do a slight offset here, just so that we know where it is. Hit Q to confirm, go to object mode, and now we should be able to have two objects here, and this is going to be our extra face. All right, so now what we can do is, again, do small extrusion, and let's go to edge mode, and I'm going to need outside edge to extrude. So let's go to move mode, hold Shift, and simply extrude this. But now if I go to object mode and isolate this, you're going to see we're going to have a problem. The problem is going to be that this edges right here are inverted. So this faces actually, so everything that it's facing inwards, we actually want that it's facing outwards. And to do that, we're going to just reverse the normals. So let's double click on everything, go to Shift right click, and face normals, reverse normals. And now the normals are going to face proper direction. If you're interested more in depth normals we covered in normals chapter, again it's on YouTube or on my website. You can check that out. So let's go ahead and align these vertices, and again just making sure camera based selection is on, and by holding V I just want to make sure that I match to this point like so. And let's go again to the edge mode, double click the edge, and in scale mode I want to hold shift and simply extrude this on the inside till somewhere like here. So we don't need to close this because we actually see that from here we're going to push one extra part out. But the thing is I want to push it a bit more on the inside because we still need to select this edge and create a bevel. So let's do that. So slide bevel. There we go. And let's go to edge mode, double click here, and bevel it one more time. Chamfer off just to create that support loop. And Q to confirm. And we're going to need to do exactly the same thing here on the top. So the thing is, here we already have, let's say, one edge, here's the other one. So that means that in this case, we're going to need to have only one here. And let's add one mid loop just in case, so that we don't have any kind of stretching. And now we have that shape established. All right. Now we're going to need to kind of like repeat the process. And let's now maybe scale this till here. And actually, you know what? Let's go to face and then delete this and push this up and add one cut here. And now what we can do is we can do it a bit differently. So let's say we can take this and then duplicate face, Q to confirm, and we can now borrow this part. And now the pivot is all the way up. So if you select this part, you're going to see where the pivot is. And again, just hit D, right click, reset pivot, and then it's going to snap into its place. Hit the D to confirm. Control 1 to come back into our selection. Let's go to edge. And now we just simply need to push this down like so. And same as before, let's go to face mode. Double click the faces, shift right click, face, go into face normals and reverse normals. Go to object mode, and there we go. So now I'm going to see also here that we have very hard edge. So let's just select it all and go to shift right click and soften, harden. And now we're going to have a proper view. And there we go. So now we have this part. We don't need any edges extra on the inside. So because everything is going to be hidden, we really don't need anything more than that. So the only thing that we're going to need here is one kind of cut here in the middle. And let's select one mid loop here, create a bevel. And then let's select that face, and simply what we can do is push it on the inside. So depending on what we're gonna get, I think this might be fine. So just pushing it on the inside and no support loop necessary because I'm pretty satisfied with how the highlight looks. The only thing we want to delete is this face from the bottom and the same face from the top. So again, go to object mode, Control 1 to isolate, and delete this face. So again, 3 to preview, 1 to exit preview. And there we go. So let's create another save here, and then we're going to continue from there. Every single part here pretty clean, and you can also rename this. So the thing about renaming is if you're working on your own projects and if something simple, it doesn't really matter if you rename it or not. If you know that this is going to be a complex piece, then it's a good idea to start naming things and grouping things together. Especially if somebody's working after you, then it's especially also a good idea to have everything named. So in this case, I just want to create again another group and call this, I don't know, main, whatever it is. And this is just enough for now. And then later, if it's necessary, we can go ahead and rename all of these. But I just wanted to get rid of all the cluster that we have here in the outliner and to make it just a bit more organized. All right, so I'm going to save this one more time. And okay, so now we have more, let's say, room to play around and explore what else we can do here, and what kind of detailing we can add, just to make the shapes a bit more interesting. So let's see what we can do. So let's say here on the top, I would like to maybe here right in the middle to create a small little cylinder, actually not cylinder, but small circular opening. So let's do now a bit faster. I'm gonna do now extrude, and let's do circular components, radial offset, and it's gonna twist this in the middle. And I'm gonna use scale tool, make sure symmetry is off, extrude it a bit on the inside, push it in, and then push it on the inside like that. Do one more extrusion. And the reason why we're doing this is just giving that sense of depth or something where shadows can escape, and it just gives an illusion of complexity where actually the object itself is not maybe that complex. So let's preview how that looks and think that might work fine. All right, so let's continue what else we can do. So for example, let's go here with the multi-cut. Let's create a small bevel here. So small bevel, Control B, Q to confirm, go to face mode, and then let's go to extrude face, small extrusion. So I'm not sure, yeah, let me undo this because I would like to do this with symmetry on the, this is going to be symmetry on the Z axis. So whatever axis is looking in this direction, that is your symmetry. So let's go to Z. And let's create a cut here in the middle. Make sure it's, oh yeah, so need to actually create a cut on both sides like this. And also make sure, so when you're working like this, just make sure that you often delete the history. So let's go to modify, actually it's going to be edit under delete all by type history. If you notice that something is getting a bit more laggy. So let's also bevel this. Q to confirm, face mode. Let's go to extrude face. And let's push all the way in and delete, because this is not going to be visible, so it's not really that important if we delete it. And select these edges, and let's simply bevel, chamfer on, 3 to preview, and there we go. So now this can be on the inside a separate piece. We can go even a step further. So select all the faces, shift right click, and then extract faces. Again, Q to confirm, and that just simply means that this is now going to be a separate object. So whenever you're doing this, it's kind of like a good idea to separate objects as much as you can, because as the things get more and more complex, it's going to be, also the object is going to be heavier, and you might also notice that my eye is starting to lag slowly. So it's kind of a good idea about that as well. Cool, so let's now continue, and maybe what I would like to do is also something to break the surface on the side, and it would be kind of interesting to follow the same detail, let's say here or here at the bottom. So let's experiment with that a bit more. What we can do is maybe select this. I'm gonna just slide it slightly to the side, and let's select the faces. So let me just undo. So let's go to, again, shift, control, and then slide while in move mode. And then let's go to face mode, hit Q to confirm, select these faces. And actually, you know what? Let's go a bit further. So let's go till here, or maybe even till here. And I just want to make sure that symmetry is world X. So here and here. Okay, and just need to slide this again. Shift, control, and slide. And actually, I now forgot, so one extra edge. So this one, again, move mode, and then shift, control, slide. Actually, in scale mode, I'm sorry, shift, control, and slide. Select these, scale mode, shift, control, and slide. All right, so now we should have the same on both sides. All right, and let's go to scale, and then let's now simply, while holding control, I'm going to extrude this on the inside, and also push this slightly on the inside as well. And let's do extrusion, extrude face. And let's go to multi-cut and create one cut here, one cut there, 3 to preview, go to object mode, and there we go. So now we have an interesting looking detail following the same form from the top. And the thing is, yeah, maybe I would like to have it even more down. So let me undo this and I'll just quickly repeat all of this. So just slide this and same thing. So just quick scale, quick push on the inside, small offset with the extrude, and with the multi-cut, 2 cuts here. All right, so now we can do the same thing here at the bottom maybe, and just want to be sure that we are following the same line. So I think this is it. So yeah, just again, extrude. You can scale it a bit more, maybe push it a bit more to the top, a bit more on the inside. Small extrusion, and like before, just multi-cut to add those support loops. And there we go. So now we have kind of like similar detail pattern following all along. Now, what we can do is a bit more like material variation. So for example, all of these parts can be different materials, but let's continue with maybe what else we can do here, just to kind of like make it more complex looking. And let's add like just small circles here. So again, circle as components. This is more like an illusion of complexity than anything else. And small offset, small thickness, and then small offset. And with the multi-cut, we just want to create a small cut here. So it's, again, just more or less an illusion of complexity than anything else. We can do the same thing here on the top. So small extrusion, circle as components, radial twist, and small offset, thickness. And this one we can maybe push a bit more on the inside, so we can catch all the shadows and simply add those cuts. All right, so think that will be fine. One thing here maybe you notice is on the surface we're getting slight deformation. So the thing is, what we can do here, alignment is set then to surface, for example, instead. So let's just twist this, good to confirm, and let's do it one more time. And also we can use maybe extrusion like this and push it like this inside. And then I can also delete it because it's going to be hidden in shadows anyway. And there we go. So now we have a much more cleaner result there. All right, so now what we can do is actually copy this from the top to the bottom. And let's go to move, clone, and push it down. And the thing is, I don't need everything. I just need, let's say, edge till here. So let's go to detach components, face mode, and delete this. And let's go to object mode. We're gonna need to rotate this. And also notice one thing, I didn't now copied everything, so I just need to be sure that I'm also copying this inner part as well. So move mode, and then we're holding shift. Let's just clone this together, and here I just need to be sure to not use everything, maybe till here. So let's double click on this edge, and then let's simply go to shift, right click, and then again detach. And like I mentioned before, what this will do is just now detach top and bottom parts, and then the bottom part we can delete. Now I would like to now rotate this part on the top, but the thing is, my rotation is all the way down, and then I'm going to rotate only this part, and I would like to rotate it all together. So the first things first, what I want to do, I'm going to combine all of this into one object. So shift, right click, and then combine, again making sure that both are selected. And then what we can do is rotate both of these. And let's just push this to the top. We can scale this one slightly because this one is smaller. And then what we can do here is fill hole. go to object mode. And since we don't need everything, we can just use, let's say, extrusion like this, push it slightly a bit more up, maybe again scale it with the extrusion a bit more on the inside, push it also on the inside, and then delete that part. So we're getting this as a result. And then we can just simply adjust everything where it belongs, maybe like this. And what we're missing still are those support loops. So just bevel this, add a small cut here, and there we go. So now we have both top and bottom solved. And I'm not sure, but maybe I would like to have this also a bit more pushed to the top. So just slightly bigger like this. And then we can add, let's say, some loops here just to even everything out. All right, so one more thing, what we can do is just minor detail, and just to balance things out, I'm gonna create a small circle right here and on the back side. So this is going to be on z-axis. And let's circulate this like so, and also just making sure that it's surface per average. And then let's extrude this. Push it slightly on the inside, maybe a bit deeper than this, and then hit G to offset one more time. And then basically just here bring the bevel. And one thing I want to do is push these vertices a bit more to the side so that we don't get a lot of pinching in that area. And there we go. So now we have the same on both sides. All right, so I think this is going to be it for now, and don't want to make this series any longer than it already is. So one final thing, again, what we can do is just quickly organize our outliner and just making sure, let's say, deleted history, and that we group everything what we need to group under one, let's say under one group without all of these unnecessary parts. So we can delete this. We can group it all here. So now we have everything connected into this one main group. Additional thing what we can do is play with the materials a bit more. So let's go to assign existing material. Let's go here to blend 1 and select this, and actually select it here. And now what I'd like to do is just find an interesting looking contrast for this tone. So I don't know, something like this. And I have also here a lot of presets I can show you. So this is going to be one of them. You can copy the colors and the values. I'm going to leave this on the screen just so you want to pause the video and just copy everything. So this is the color value. And what we can do then is rename this blend 1 into, let's say, main material, something like this. Then let's say this in the middle can be something like chrome. So assign favorite material. Let's add a blend. And this might be chrome. And again, I'm going to use a preset for this that I have already prepared. And I'm just going to leave all the values here just in case you want to copy the color values or these values here. And there we go. So here we covered a lot of steps, a lot of functions, also things to kind of like keep an eye on, and things to avoid and stuff like that. So usually, let's say if you are transferring between the softwares coming from Blender to Maya or Maya to Blender, usually I would advise practicing this kind of like a very simple simple objects, simple projects, just to get familiar with, you know, how each of the tools work. And when you get that, because in the first few, let's say, days of learning the new software, you might get stuck just in the tools, you know, where the tools are. And so you are not focusing so much on the topology. And then as you're getting more and more familiar with the tools, the workflow itself is going to be faster, simply because you know already where everything is and you went through that process and whatnot. So it's definitely kind of like things that I would recommend both ways. So regardless of whatever you're creating, either let's say transferring from one software and another, or you just want to practice in general, like modeling stuff and modeling tools, topology wise, like daily practices, daily exercises, these small kit bash parts are really useful, because not just that you're practicing your modeling skill, modeling tools, you're also creating, let's say, valuable pieces that you'll be able to reuse later down the line whenever you need, let's say, something similar. So in the next video, I'm going to show you now how we can prepare everything, let's say, for the rendering in Arnold. Welcome back, everyone, and let's continue. So I already prepared here a small scene. So we're going to talk about here rendering with Arnold, simply because Arnold comes included with Maya, and it's also relatively easy to use. And here we're going to cover very basic. We are not going to go into any complex stuff. I just want to share a basic workflow, how you can set up your scenes real quick to present your models in the best possible light, especially if you're a beginner and if you're working on very easy assets like this, just so you can test, let's say, the highlights to see if there's any pinching and so on. So we're going to discuss a couple of things here, and don't worry, I'm going to delete everything here what we have, and then we're going to start from the beginning. The reason I assembled the scene is I wanted to talk about something very important, and that is a scene composition and basic contrast that we're going to focus on here. So we need to first establish what is going to be the main goal of this render, which in our case means if you want to present the model, we want to present the model in the best possible light. So that means the least distractions possible, and the most focus is going to be on the model itself. So that also means that the background that we're going to use, it's not going to be that much of a distraction, and everything, light setup, the backgrounds, the materials, everything is going to be focusing on the model itself. The thing is, for example, if we now go ahead and create super busy background, and if we add a lot of materials here on top, and if we try to do some super complex lighting setups and whatnot, there's a chance that we actually lose the model from the focus. So no longer the model itself is in the focus. Now the scene as a general composition becomes the main focal point of your presentation. So in this case, the only thing what we're trying to do is create the presentation of the model itself, and everything else is sort of like secondary. I'm still going to show you how to add, for example, one extra light. So let me go here into perspective camera. For example, this light is going to be just that minimum lighting to add, let's say, additional touch, additional contrast to the scene itself, and also how to add very subtle material. So this is going to be one example, that it's not, let's say, overshadowing the model itself. So it's nothing like too complex that has a lot of dirt, a lot of damage, and a lot of whatnot. So we are not trying to do that. We're just trying to present the model itself. So this is going to be the main focal point. The another thing is going to be the contrast in the scene, which means that if we're presenting a darker looking model, ideally what we want to do is have a lighter background, and same is going to be vice versa. So for example, if you're planning to present a model in more lighter setup so that everything has more brighter tone, that means that also the background is going to be darker. So we always going to try to find the balance between the two, so that model is clearly visible and that every shape is clearly read. So this is going to be kind of like the ultimate goal. All right, so now I'm going to delete here everything, and we can start from beginning. And again, just a small breakdown. We are going to select, actually set a main camera, which I'm going to actually show you how to do. We can leave, it's not that complex. And then we're going to create some of the materials. And again, I'm just going to show you how to load in one texture and how to set a general super simple setup for this kind of presentation. So we're not going to use any special background here. We're just going to use a regular background in combination with, let's say, an image background here, which doesn't have to be an image. It can also be a color, so that will work as well. But let's then jump straight into this. I'm going to delete here a lot of the parts. So for example, this light we do not need. And I will go back to our general setup here. And actually, let's go and reset the workspace. So we have our general setup. I'm going to leave remove the sky dome. Actually, let's remove the plane. And also let me, from the hypershade, just do some quick setup here. And I'm going to remove all the materials here that I've applied. And let's just leave the Lambert. And that's going to be fine. And yeah, so first things first, let's go. So, okay, I'm going to explain this. So basically what I did here is just copied a couple of examples of our object here around just to create, let's say, this sort of like setup. This is super easy to do. You just, again, you would duplicate the clone, and with the rotation, you would reposition them where you would want. So this is not as complicated. And the next thing, again, I just want to rearrange now these panels again. So let's go to Windows, UI Elements, and remove all of these parts we do not need. So we'll close this. Outliner, also I want to undock. And now a couple of things that we're going to need here are, from the Arnold, we're going to need to use the Arnold render. So either IPR, it really doesn't matter. You can just also open it from here. So let me just close this, but we can use actually Arnold render. And don't worry about what we have here right now. So we're gonna need this. The next thing what we're going to need is Hypershade, which you can find it right here, or if you spacebar click, it's going to also be here under Windows, and then we're going to have here rendering editors, and then it's going to be here, Hypershade. As you notice, I have this on a hotkey, so I really don't use this part, but it's going to be either here or simply click on this little icon, and there we're going to have our Hypershade graph. So this is going to be our material setup. All right, so if you see any additional windows, you can close this if you want, or you can leave it as is. I just have here a custom setup for my Hypershade. I'm not sure if I can reset this somewhere. But basically you will have probably here one extra window with all the materials, and there's a small X like here. If you don't need it, you can close it. And basically that's what I did, and that's how I have editor that probably maybe looks slightly different. And now what I would like to do is just stack this to the side. So I will just take this and stack this here to the side, and then Hypershade stack here at the bottom. Just left click, drag, and stack it right here. All right, so there we are. And now we have a better presentation of what we see here. Now, as you can notice here, I already have sort of like a camera prepared, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And basically you're going to go to Panels, Perspective, and simply add a brand new camera. So this is now going to be your new camera setup. Here you can change some things, and usually what I first change is focal length. So that simply means, let's say if you have like focal length of 10, you're going to have very sort of like perspective view. And if you go to, let's say, something like 100, you're going to have more like an orthographic view. So some middle, like 50, 70, 80, it's going to be just enough, let's say, for what we need. The next thing is you probably want to enable safe areas, or what's called like title safe area. And this simply means that you don't want to go outside of these bounds right here. Let's say like this. You want to kind of like position your objects within these lines and make sure that they're more or less centered and that they're not exiting these title safe areas. So this is going to be kind of like your first setup, which again, if you go to my main camera, I'm going to show you again. And here, if you wish to rename, you can simply rename this here to camera. And then next time when you're loading your panels, you're just going to have here, but let me do it actually from the camera section. And then it's going to be right here, but there's also one more, and that is if we go to outliner, and there's also going to be here one more. So you're going to notice here also is going to be perspective 1 and camera. So that means that you're going to need to rename both of these. So you can just copy this one and paste it here. And now we're going to have this one selected too. So now when you go to panels, it's going to be right here. And also when you go to the Arnold render view, it's going to be here as well. So here I'm going to just use the one that I already created because I already have kind of like the camera setup that I already like. And now that simply means that we can switch to our perspective view and simply fly around the way we want to, and our original camera setup will remain unchanged. So this is basically how you switch between the cameras and how you sort of like set up the camera the most kind of optimal way for rendering. Additional thing, what I would like to do is I would add a plane here, and this is going to be our floor. So this is going to be our floor. And one thing I like to do is I like to select everything. So object mode, select all of the objects in the scene. So if it's everything unselected, just simply select it like this, left click, hold, marquee select, and then let's go and add a first material. And usually what I like to do is I like to apply one material to everything first, and then later down the line switch up the materials and add more and more. So just so that we can establish some kind of lighting setup, we're going to need any kind of material first. So let's go to assign favorite material, and it's going to be right here, standard surface, or assign new material, and then you're going to have this pop up right here. And then under Arnold, we're going to go shader, and then under shader, we're going to also have here AI standard surface. So this is going to be our material. If it's by any chance not set as your favorite material, you can always go assign new material and then right click on it. So under Arnold, and you're gonna right click on it and simply set add to favorites. That simply means that next time when you go to assign favorite material, it's going to be right here. And also you notice here as automatic attribute editor, that simply means whenever you apply material, that attribute editor will automatically pop up for you. But in this case, we have the setup on the right side, so we don't really need that. All right, so now we have basic material side. We won't see it yet because we still have Lambert view active. So if you switch between the two, now you're gonna see that we actually have some materials active, but I'm gonna keep it in Lambert. And also one thing, if these cameras here are kind of getting in your way, you can always go under show and then cameras, and then you won't see those cameras anymore. All right, now when we have that set up, let's add a first light, and the light that we're going to use is going to be a skydome light. So the skydome light is going to be our, let's say, container for HDRI. So let's go to under Arnold, lights, and then skydome light. And there we go. So from this point on, we simply now need to load in the HDRI that is going to hold, that's actually going to be contained within the skydome. And let's go here under color, and here under this checkerboard, we're going to click on it. That simply means that now instead of the slider and instead of a color, we are loading in the texture. And again, we need to go to under Arnold and use AI image. So simply click on that, and now we simply need to find HDRI somewhere. You can use anyone you wish, but here what I would recommend is definitely HDRI with the very, very neutral contrast. That means that it's very bright and not so much of a, let's say, hard on contrast between light and shadows. So that kind of has a neutral form. I can show you. So I have something like this, which is again very, very neutral, not too contrasty. And later, let's say we can change something into more contrast like this. But just for, let's say, organization and setup first materials, you want to ideally something like this, something very, very neutral. It can be studio lighting, but it can also be, let's say, outdoor, indoor, but just something that it's not overly too contrasty. So let's load that in, and now we have that loaded. So we have a skydome, we have a floor, we have a first material, and now, for example, if you would like to hide the skydome, if it's maybe too much in your way, you can go here on the viewport and simply set this value to 0. And then it's not going to be visible. Also, you can maybe set it to 10. It's going to be visible partly if you wish to edit it, something like that. But if you want to, it can always be easily accessed here under lights, and it's going to be right here. So you're going to have here lights, materials, probably the most two tabs that you're going to use. All right, so let's now continue. And I want to open, first of all, outliner and just delete the second camera, just so that I don't have that in my way. And let's now cover the render settings right here. So these are my final settings. I have camera set to 8, 3, and 3, but we're gonna start with 2, 2, and 2, just so that we get those faster renders out. So in terms of settings under honor render and then the sampling, these are kind of like the minimum values that you can set up. And then later, depending on, let's say, how satisfied you are with the results, you can always start to increase slowly this value, where camera AA or camera samples is going to be your kind of like the main driving quality. One additional thing here under common, just a quick mention, is you can under image size set your preset. Here I went with HD 720 just so that we have enough space here and that we get that much of a faster render. Later, when you're satisfied, you can change this to any other value as well. But for now, that's gonna stay like that. And here, the CPU render engine for now, and that is basically it. So super simple setup, just enough to get us started and just enough to get something rendered. All right, so let's close this, and now we can hit here play, and then you can see what's going on. So here I have something pink, as if you notice. Let me just zoom on that, and here I'm gonna go to 1 and 1 again. And if you want to, for example, do the same thing in this viewport, instead of moving the image, you can go to window and then 3D manipulation. That simply means that now under viewport, here you'll also be able to move everything. So this pink area right here, that simply means that material somewhere is not fully applied. And if we now again double check, my camera based selection was on, so that means that I haven't actually selected everything. And let's do again assign AI standard surface. Actually, now I have a couple of them here, and I'm going to need to delete the ones that are extra. All right, so there we go. And this is the first one, the first material that we applied, and I would also like to rename it to something like base material, because this is going to be the one that we're going to actually establish everything. All right, so let's go to the main camera, and now our main camera is going to be in the center here, and now we have a free perspective so that we can move everywhere around and be free if we need to do any kind of adjustments. All right, so as you can notice, we get pretty fast render, but the thing is, it's also pretty grainy. So if we want to, and if we have fast enough render, we can just increase here the samples, and then we can see, okay, if that is going fast enough, then we can maybe leave it as it is. All right, so let's now close it and let's start playing with some lights and materials. So like I mentioned, now our goal here is going to be to establish that contrast. So first things first, let's add a bit of a roughness to this material. And when we're talking about materials, we're not going to use a lot of values here. I'm going to cover very, very basic stuff. So we're going to play with the base color and then specular roughness. And basically that is all that we're going to touch here. And now in terms of color, we can, let's say, tone the color a bit down just to find that, let's say, mid value. And also you're going to have here a lot of presets. If you wish, you can just directly assign a preset, but I want to show you just a couple of values here. And also one thing here, in case we're working with metals, there's going to be this metalness value, which means that either this material is going to be metal or not. So if it is metal, then you're going to push this all the way up to 1. There's not going to be metal, so it's either 0 or 1, and basically that is all. Now the roughness itself currently set to 0.2. If we set this all the way to 0, that simply means that we're going to get fully shiny material. And if we increase that, let's say, to something like 0.6, then we're going to get more of a rougher material. So this is not going to be dependent on which type of a material are we trying to achieve. So usually, let's say if you're trying to get some kind of chrome, it's going to be between 0.1, 0. or 15. Or if you're trying to get more like gunmetal stuff, it's going to be more like 0. let's say 45 or something like that. So these are kind of like two values that we're going to use in this case. And then basically, yeah, that is it, how we set original original scene. And it's really important just to get that first material out in that first value. And let's say, for example, if you want to have a darker tone, dark material, you need to establish your dark tone. So for example, if our dark tone is going to be, let's say 0.1, this is going to be our black color, then that simply means that every other black color that we are creating, it's going to be the same value, 0.1. And the same thing goes for the bright or white colors, let's say 0.8. This is going to be our white color or white tone. So we're just going between these two values. But for now, I'm just putting it to something like 0.2. All right, so now when we have that established, let's go one step further. One step further is going to be establishing the light. So I would say that for us, the lighting is going to be much more important than the material, because what we need to establish here is proper contrast so that we can clearly see what we're trying to present. And so the material is going to be, kind of like secondary option. We can advance more and more into material, but we don't have to if we really don't want to. So right now I just want to add, let's say, one light that is going to bring a bit more contrast to the scene and just break down all this, let's say, gray area. So let's go here under Arnold, and under lights, we're going to add an area light. And immediately it's going to be selected for us. So let's select Move Tool, and I'm going to just start moving and start scaling, and make sure to see where the direction of the light is. So this is going to be pointing in the direction of where the light is. So we are also going to be sure that we are rotating everything properly in that direction as well. All right, so the thing is, even though the light is pointing in that direction, there's not much happening in the scene at this moment. So we need to do some of the adjustments in the light itself. So again, we won't touch a lot of settings here. Probably intensity and exposure, maybe color and spread. And that's kind of it. The only thing extra you want to do, if maybe you want to disable normalize, and then you just need to kind of like increase more of the exposure values. So I'm going to show you the difference. And now to see this light a bit better, usually what I like to do is apply a very, very sharp tone color, something like red, and increase either the exposure or the intensity, or remove the normalize. And now you're going to see the light a bit more clearly, and also you're going to see which direction the light itself is affecting. Additional thing, so now we have color, intensity and exposure we didn't change. The only thing we did is turned off normalize. So we can also turn the normalize on, and let's say turn the exposure all the way up till 10. So that kind of also works. Now spread, on the other hand, that simply means that now we're going to reduce the spread almost to a laser beam of how this top light looks like. So if I reduce the spread, now you're going to see we're going to have clear setup for this light. We're going to see the clear direction which this light is hitting. So this might be helpful, for example, if you're trying to establish a scene or establish a position of the light and just give it maybe a sense of direction. So that simply, okay, I want to position my light, let's say, in this direction, and I want that it's affecting this particular area. So you're going to do something like that. So let's say something like this. And now we can control which area this light is affecting. And now when we know which area this light is affecting, now we can tone down the values. So for example, we can either tone down the exposure, we can, let's say, increase the spread. So now the spread is a bit wider. Or let's say if we release the spread all the way to 0, maybe we can tone down the exposure to something like 6. And now we're going to get much more subtle tone on our objects. And maybe, let's say, increase it to 7. And now we have a clear visual representation where this light is actually hitting. And this is kind of like that quick setup. All right, so now it comes to the color. Now the color itself value, we don't want to have anything strong like that. Ideally, what we want to have is very, very like warm tone, something like in the middle, not like very, very strong tone like this. This is more like to identifying where the light is. But for the light itself, we are looking for some kind of like midtones. So something like this, that it's like choose the color and then go somewhere in the middle and switch between the mid and the end. So kind of like hover in the middle area. And let's say something like that. All right, so now that we have light established, let's now talk about the floor, because floor right now, it's like empty sets. And if I, let's say, scale down the floor, you're going to see that now we're actually going to see our HDRI map. So the thing is, you can use shadow matte for that. For example, you don't want to see the, let's go to the lights, let's go to our sky dome. And for example, I don't want to see a sky dome in my render. So I will go into sky dome attributes and under camera, so under visibility, let me show you one more time. So we're going to go under sky dome light attributes and then visibility and turn the camera off. That will simply remove the camera from our scene. Now, in case, for example, I do not want to have these edges right here. I only want to see the shadows. Now you have in Arnold, what's it called? Shadow matte. So let's go to assign new material, Arnold, and then assign AI shadow matte. And this, what actually this is going to do is just show us the shadows. But right now we don't see any shadows because first we're going to need the background for this. So right now here on the settings, you can simply choose a background color, hit OK, and then you're going to notice that we are starting to get some shadows. But the thing is, the shadows are not really correct. So if we go into AI Sky Dome and turn the camera on, you're going to see that we are getting much more brighter results with the camera on than camera off. So this is something that I don't really like with the shadow matte, so I don't really use it, but I will show you a workaround for something that we can actually use. So let's, instead of shadow matte, let's apply a different material. So let's go to assign favorite material, standard surface, and let's call this floor. All right, and I'm gonna collapse all of these because we don't need that. So now when we have floor selected, you can go here to this icon, which will focus the graph of our floor. And basically what I'm trying to do here now is I would like to add sort of like a fall off everywhere around so that the background slowly fades off into our background color. So to do that, we are just now implement our first node, and basically now the nodes we are just going to need to connect to appropriate positions. So for example, if something is connected to opacity, which here we want to fade it off, that means that we're also going to need to find opacity channel, which is going to be right here. All right, so to make this work, we're going to hit tab here on an empty space and then simply type in ramp. And then what we need is going to be AI ramp RGB. And basically this now color we're going to plug in into opacity. And now you're going to see that already something is starting to happen in our main scene. So to move this even further, let's go here in under, this is going to be under type, set currently to V, just change it to circular. And interpolation, we're going to change from linear to smooth. And now the only thing what we need to do is invert this color. And now you're going to see that we are slowly getting this fading in into our background. But the thing is, now we can also scale this a bit more and then play with the setting here until we are comfortable that we have enough room. And there we go. So now we can kind of slowly fade everything off into the background and also preserve our proper shadows. And now also with the floor, we have a bit more kind of like playing room on what to do with the color, what kind of color to add and whatnot. And also here, maybe just set the brightest value a bit more away from the center, because you're gonna notice now the difference in shadows is still a bit transparent, but when you move it a bit away from the center, we are going to get all those shadows back. So just trying to find the right balance. So this is something we don't want, but something like this with the small fall off is going to work just fine. And basically, yeah, we're slowly getting there where we are getting that, that contrast between the lights, materials, background, and our model. So our model is clearly presented and everything is looking, I think, good so far. All right, so we can now continue even further, and let's now try to play with more material. So here, actually, I'm going to add one more material, and that is going to be chrome material to, let's say, these three pieces. So the only thing we need to do is select them and go to add. So right click, assign favorite material, standard surface, and or assign new material, Arnold, and go here, AI standard surface. And there we go. So now we have this material applied to that selection. Now again, if you want to, you can simply select here from the presets. Let's say there's a chrome and go to replace, or simply push the metalness all the way to 1 and roughness, let's say, all the way down. And now for the chrome, you're not typically going to use, let's say, this bright of a color. We're going to just tone it down a little bit, like so. And there we go. So this is going to be our chrome. And again, if, like I mentioned, I'm going to show you, if you choose the preset, it's going to be just like that. And again, we're just going to tone the values and maybe increase the roughness to something like 0.1. And there's our chrome. So maybe a bit more darker. And that is all. All right, so now we have the scene set up. So we have our materials. So let's go to our base material and let's see what we have here. So our base dark is 0.2. And now to make it even more interesting, like I said, this is now going to be the balance of whatever we're trying to do. So if, let's say, we want to have even more brighter background, and let me just go again into our floor. I can also right click on the floor and go to graph network, and then here I can see it a bit more. And then simply we need to go to the ramp and just adjust maybe this ramp a bit better. I think that's going to be a bit better. All right, now what I would like to do is play a bit more with the base material. So here I would like to talk about another nodes, which again, it's going to be, I would say, if you don't have to play with this at the very start, this is going to be, let's say, just enough to get you started and present your models really, really quick. So that you have, like I mentioned, this contrast between the background and your models, that everything is presented nicely and that you have a nice contrast in the scene. Let's say that the lights are not overexposed, and basically that you have nice composition just between, let's say, the lighting and one material. And then later, when you get more comfortable with the scene composition, then you can start, let's say, adding more and more complex materials and, let's say, more and more complex lighting compositions. But just in case, let's say we want to play a bit further and we would like to add a bit more, let's say, texture to our metal. So I'm just go to render settings and maybe increase this now slightly because I think we have time. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So right now, let's say our roughness is set to 0.450. If we increase that too high, you're going to see what happens. And if we decrease that's too low, again, we're going to have super shiny material. So we're trying to get something in the middle, but again, that we put the texture instead of this roughness. And then what is going to happen is that the texture is going to drive the dark and white values and create randomness on the surface and give it appearance that the surface is actually not fully, let's say, either shiny or that it's not without imperfections. So we're going to do that next. So we're going to need two nodes for this. One node is going to be, so here in an empty space, just tap and go to AI image. This is going to be one node. So the thing is, when we load, let's say, any kind of image, Let me load an image from here. So here I have from Megascans some roughness images, and I'm going to load this one and simply hit load. All right, and now when we have an image, if I go directly and connect the image, so we need to connect the image to our roughness. And basically when you see, let's say, red connection to the green connection will not really go. It's going to be either green to green or red to red. But if you, let's say, expand the red here, you're going to see that we still have some green nodes here. So you can also connect those. And if you connect them together, you're going to see that not much things are going to change simply because we don't have UVs here and the texture might appear stretched. So to fix that, we're going to load another node, which is going to be triplanar. So AI triplanar. So this node is actually going to fix the problem of us not having UVs. So let's go here, and then again, we're going to connect here into the input. We're going to connect our color. So red to red. And again, from here, we're going to output color. So exactly the same thing, like as an output color, it is now becoming our roughness. So we're just skipping one step and adding one node in between. By default, triplanar might appear again too big, so you won't see much. But if we change, let's say, coordinate space from world and scale this all the way down, because usually Megascans textures will appear slightly too large, we should now start to see some kind of imperfections on the surface. So there's also additional things that we can play around with. So for example, you will notice that offset and multiply, if you start to play with these values, you will again either get super shiny or super rough material. So you can try and kind of balance it all together until you get sort of like visible looking texture on your model. So the goal here is not to have extensively visible texture. It's going to be something very, very subtle that it's catching that highlight, that actually the surface is not super polished, but that there's actually some kind of imperfections on the surface. So I might also go and try a different texture. So for example, this one might be slightly more visible. So again, I'm not sure how much you will see in the video, but again, the goal here is not to overdo the texture, so now go into some crazy dirt maps or whatnot. The only goal is just to slightly break that surface imperfection, or that it's not looking like insanely polished, and that is all. So we don't want to cause any kind of special distractions away from the model. It's only kind of like to complement it slightly and not really take any attention out of it. And basically this is kind of that minimal workflow that you would need to put in to, let's say, create a presentation. So now we can also do one final thing, and that is go into lights, sky dome, and now we can actually try and load in a HDRI that has slightly more contrast. And for example, this is now the map that I loaded in. As you can see, it's slight more contrast than what we have here as a balanced one. So this one is going to be very, very subtle. This one is going to have more of a darker tones. So let's say that we are fine with this one. And now, for example, if let's say some materials need extra adjustments, we can do that. So for example, chrome, maybe we can increase the roughness slightly. And I don't know if this is a bit too dark, we can also maybe increase the color here, or simply go into AI image and here increase an offset to this just a bit so that it's slightly better visible. And that is all. So very, very subtle changes. Additional thing what I would like to mention, so here you can select any object in the scene, and you will notice that immediately you will get, let's say, just rename this to Chrome. So just double click here. And whatever you click here, you're going to get the same material right here in the property editor. Additionally, you can also click here in the viewport itself, and also you will get those materials out as well. And yeah, this is basically it. I wanted to keep it very, very simple. Just enough to get you started, and that you can just try and play around with this very simple settings. And like I mentioned, you really do not need much at the very beginning. You just need to have very good, let's say, light compositions, and then later, once you kind of mastering that or find the right balance for the scenes and whatnot, then you can start playing, let's say, with more and more complex materials and explore that. But let's say for just a general introduction in how Arnold works and how to set up, let's say, the basic nodes, the basic materials, this is going to be, I believe, enough information to start you with your first renders. And now again, finally, we can just go into our render settings and maybe start to increase some of the values. So for example, diffuse to 3, specular to 3, and maybe camera to 8. This is something what I experimented before, and I found that kind of like decent results for that. And again, yeah, so you don't want to, one thing I maybe forgot to mention, the thing you don't want to do is set something like 10 10 10. This is something that's, it's totally unnecessary. It's not going to help you at all. So you're just going to need to balance the values, and usually the camera one is going to be your kind of like main driving. So in case you have any questions or something is still left unclear, feel free to ask in the comment section down below. I'm going to give you this right here, the setup. It's going to be linked in the description down below. If you want to visit my website, you can download it from there, just in case you wish to practice. And yeah, like I mentioned, in case any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section down below. I will try to answer everything if I can. And yes, thank you very much for watching, and I'm going to see you next time. Hello everyone and welcome back. I'm Mario, and in this video we're going to wrap up this intro to hard surface series with UVs. So here again, same with rendering, same with the modeling. We're going to cover very basics just to give you a quick start so you can start working and stop unwrapping your models. So you might ask yourself, why didn't we cover this kind of like topic before rendering? And usually, for example, let's say that you're not sure if the model is finished, you probably want to render it first just to check, let's say, all the highlights, if everything is rendering properly, if materials are not showing any kind of pinching, and if so, then probably you're going to do some maybe modeling adjustments, and then later, once you are satisfied or once you think you're finished with the modeling part, then you're going to go ahead and start working on your UVs. So let's first define what the UVs are, because again, this is going to be a very beginner friendly introduction. So we're going to go and break it down everything from the start. So you've probably seen this example many times. So when you have a cube, and then how the cube would look like if we need to kind of flatten it in a 2D space. So basically that is what UVs are. Instead of a 3D space, you're going to need to, let's say, transfer your 3D object into a 2D space like this. So from 2D space, if you check the cube, it's going to look like a square. And our goal is basically make every single side of the object visible in 2D space. So whatever you click, let's say here, in 2D space should actually correlate to the 3D space as well. Because right now, let's say if I click on this face right here, we will not actually see it in this view, but the goal is that we actually see it in 2D space. So this is what we're trying to do. We're just trying to kind of like unwrap this cube in this fashion so that every single face of the cube is visible. And this is going to be one example. The other example is going to be, let's say, the cylinder. So if you again see the cylinder from the side, it's again going to look like a rectangle. And our goal is actually to show every single side of the cylinder in this 2D view. So again, just a quick 3D representation of what we're trying to do. We are just trying to show every single part of it all in 2D space. So let me actually just come here and adjust this to 0. So curvature set to 0. And now we have, let's say, this side fully shown in 2D space. And this is how, for example, unwrapping will work. Same thing with the top. if we would like to show the top in 2D space, it's going to be like this, and then it's going to be like this as well. So now we can see every side in 2D space. So flatten out, it doesn't have any kind of depth. And basically this is kind of everything that we're trying to achieve when talking about UVs. Another thing I would like to talk about, and that is called a seam. So basically seam is going to be the break that we're going to create, sort of like a connection within the object that allows us to unwrap it in 2D space. Because if there wouldn't be, let's say, this part disconnected here and this part disconnected there, we wouldn't actually be able to rotate it or actually position it into 2D space or flatten it. So we need to kind of like cut cylindrical parts somewhere, or cubes, we need to cut them somewhere. And these cuts that will actually provide us with these detachments we'll call seams. So basically, again, the seam is just going to be the cuts on the surface that allows us to break down the parts into multiple other pieces and to flatten that surface into from the 3D space into a 2D space. So another example would be, let me just show you that as well. So here I have another example prepared. And this is going to be, let's say, a bit more of a different looking object where, for example, we have a depth value here, and we also have this detail. It's going to also have a depth value. And usually when we see, let's say, an object like this, and when we're searching for places to cut. Now, remember this example from here when we have the cylinder. So we need to cut on the cylindrical parts. We need to have a cut somewhere to flatten it into a 2D space so that from that cut, we're able to flatten it out. So on the cylindrical parts, on any kind of part, there needs to be a cut somewhere to flatten it out. And in our case here, now we're also going to need to find a cut. And usually, let's say that's why we're going to put strong emphasis on topology and that our topology is clean. Because when our topology is clean, then we can easily find, let's say, edges like this that are going to, let's say, be our future cuts. So how to know, for example, where to create the cuts? It's usually going to be something, let's say, hidden within our support loops or structural loops, like in this case, and basically something that it's creating depth or height. So for example, this cylinder is no longer flat like in our example here. Now we actually have a detail on this side. And basically that detail is going to be, let's say, your detachment, and this is going to be your seam. So think of it again in terms of detachment, the topology. So if we, let's say, detach this part of the topology and push this out, now we're no longer worrying about this detail on the inside. And now when we're talking about flattening, now we can flatten this part on its own. And again, if we're looking for these kind of seams, we're just going to hide these seams somewhere where they are not visible. So for example, on these places, and again, talking about the cylinder, that also means that we are going to need to have some kind of a cut somewhere on, let's say, on the back side. Same on our example. Now everything, for example, what it's shown here blue, can be our detachment. And then we can go even a step further. So let's say if you're talking about flattening this one, let's say even from the front, this already looks more or less, let's say, flattened and can be, let's say, in terms of UV language, if we would need to, let me just isolate this, and if we would need to flatten this, it's going to be pretty much simple, and we still manage to see every single face. So that is basically kind of the goal, that once we unwrap and when we flatten objects, that we can see every single face. And now the difference between the two is that, for example, if we flatten this one, we will actually not see every single face. So the top faces are lost, bottom faces are lost, and the back faces are lost. While here, if we flatten this one, we still can see every single face on a surface. So this is why, for example, this one we need to sort of like unwrap in this fashion so that we get that flat representation. Let me now undo this. I'm going to show you one more thing. All right, so I'm going to show you now how these seams would look like and how UVs would look like. And I'm going to go here to Workspace, General, and we can go here to UV Editing. or alternatively here UVs and then open UV editor. If you click it here, then you're gonna get this floating window like so. And if you go to workspace, UV editing, then you're going to have more of a, let's say, optimized workspace where basically this UV window from here is just docked on the side. So when we now, let's for example take a look on the UVs right here, now we can also see these seams or these cuts a bit more clearly. So these again seams, what we're trying to do is basically kind of hide them in less visible places depending on the situation that we are. Because let's say if we decide to preview this, let's say if we decide to preview the checkerboard or the texture, how the texture would wrap around our object, then we're going to see that this checkerboard has these sort of like interruptions where the seams are. So whatever this thick white line is, that means that is going to be interruption in the texture. So you can see it a bit more clearly here. And then that also means that if you have interruptions in the texture, ideally you want to hide it in less visible place. So let's say an example. If this object right here is going to be something that it's going to be shown only from the frontal view and not so much from the back, then in terms of hiding the seams, we would hide it in place that it's not visible to the camera. So for example, in this case, this place would not be ideal. More ideal place would be somewhere here. And the same thing, let's say when we now rotate on the back, you will see that now the seam cut is on the back. Because again, if we enable this texture, so here it's not going to be that much shown, but you're going to see it here. So you want to have this interruption somewhere where it's not visible, for example, here behind. So let's say again, this is going to be our frontal shape and the camera is going to be mainly focused from the front. Then we want to avoid having, let's say, this type of seams here. So again, seams are not going to be that much big of an issue in many situations, but again, it's just kind of like a good thing just to keep that in mind. So yeah, in short, this is what UVs are. And for example, if we just do a quick breakdown, if I double click here, you're going to see which part represents, let's say, which on a surface. So here is this part unwrapped, and you can see this one right here. It's looking exactly the same as if we flattened that one. And this one again looks exactly like we flattened that cylinder. And then this one from the top, again, if you just unwrap this or use the same, let's say, process that we use for the cylinder, if you would like flatten it out, then it would look like this. So basically that seam is sort of like you have a piece of paper going in a circle and cut that piece of paper in half. And then if you flatten that piece of paper, then you will get this part. And then finally we have this bottom, and then these parts are going to be the top, and this is going to be this one. And again, just to summarize where to create these cuts, it's usually going to be something that indicates depth or something that indicates height. So in this case, something again that indicates very, very strong, let's say, angle changes, like between here, between this surface and this surface, there is a strong angle change. And then this is again something where we're probably going to think about adding seams. All right, so let's now go ahead into our example and let's see what we can do there. Now I loaded our little project right here, and we can now start taking a look on how we can unwrap this. So here you're going to notice I have everything grouped into one group actually, and all of these parts are right here, part of the group. And also you notice when the group is selected that here in our UV editor we already have some UVs. So in order to have a clean slate, we can just go here and edit and delete everything that we have, and we're just going to create brand new UVs from scratch. Alternatively, you can go here under UV, and then you're going to be here under delete UVs as well. So it doesn't matter which one you use. So, all right, so let's begin, and slowly as we start working, we're going to also introduce some of the tools here. There are only a couple of tools that are really relevant. The rest you're going to see along the way. But again, I'm going to keep this very, very simple, very beginner friendly, so that we don't go into any overly complex actions here. So let's now take a look into, let's say, the most simplest form of them all, and that is going to be this one. So for example, in this case, we are now going to try to find a place where to create that seam. So where to hide that cut that we can then unwrap everything all together. So what we can do is, for example, I'm going to show you, let's say, just again, as a kind of rule of thumb, what you can do, for example, also create, if you have a room, create a cut here in the middle, and then this middle cut can be, let's say, our opening. But just for the sake of practice, I'm going to show you that usually in many situations you are going to search for places that have strong angle differences. So like this. So whenever something is very, very flat, usually flat from the front camera, this is kind of like an indicator that might be a good idea, let's say, to place your cuts there. So again, just for the sake of practice, because there are going to be different situations where you can place your cuts, let's just do it like this. So this now is going to be, let's say, a cut, so we can plan our seam ahead of time. Alternatively, also what I mentioned, you can add a cut here in the middle, which again, if we do, then this is going to be, let's say, our seam, and this is going to be, let's say, the place where we unwrap everything, and it's going to be much more hidden in the shadows. Let's say if we decide that these cuts right here are too strong, or the seams are visible or something. But again, it's going to be very, very dependent on different situations. So first things first, before we do anything, we are going to need to have some kind of UVs here. And also before we do anything, just make sure to go here under edit, delete all by type history, just in case you notice that the UVs are not behaving in a way that you want to. And also we're going to freeze transformations here, which basically means freezing transformations if, let's say, the object is set to, let me just go back, is set to, let's say, different values. You just want to even these values back to zeros and ones. So that's kind of like the main function of it all. And let's go back to UV editing. And what I'm going to do is just go to create. And here we're going to create new UVs, and we're just going to use planar for now. All right, and it doesn't matter how it looks here, because we just need to detach something and just start working. So I'm going to select these two here. And the way that we create cuts now, we're going to go into create and actually cut and sew. And here we're going to have a function that it's called cut, and simply create a cut here. And now when we have that, let's go into our UV editor, right click, select UV shell. And now we'll be able to select any part, it doesn't matter which it is, and select the move tool and then push it to the side. And now you're going to see that now we have these two shells. And now what we can do is we can convert this into this flat area. So to do that, we'll simply go here under the unfold menu and click unfold. And there we go. So that is going to be our first set of UVs. Same thing is going to be here. So let's just do unfold, and there we are. Now this is a bit curved. So what we want to do is we're going to either rotate it, or we can go here under arrange and layout and simply orient shells and orient shells. And that is it. And once we are done with that, what we can select these two and go to layout. And what layout will do is just pack it here all under one. Let me just show you again. Here under one place. And before clicking layout, for example, you can shift left click on this. And here you're going to have some of the options. And then, for example, here I'm using texture. Let me actually reset this so we can see. You can leave most of the settings here on default, and then for the layout setting, texture map size, you can choose any you want to. For now, we can go with 2K, and also shell padding simply means, let's say that we put something like 4 here or 3, hit apply, and go to layout UVs. That again simply means that now the distance between the shells will have this small padding in between, and that is basically all. And yeah, this is going to be our general process. So now we need to continue and do exactly the same thing all over the place. And later, if we decide, for example, that the seam here is too strong, we can either come back and do, let's say, a seam on the back, and try to play with various seams positioning and just try to find the most optimal. Let's say that it's working for us. And that is basically all. And ideally, again, if this is going to be, let's say, your frontal view, that means that ideally in that case you want to hide seams all the way on the back. So let's say that what you see here should be then ideally hidden on the back. So these hard white lines, ideally you want to hide on the back. So if you notice that that is the problem, what you can do is redo all of this. So let's go to create, and again, new planar. And now you're going to have a clean slate. Means that now we can come here on the back. Let's say create a new seam here on the back. And do the same thing. So come here in the cut and sew, create a new cut, go to right click, UV shell, and then go to unfold and unfold. And then you're going to have a new, let's say, shell right here, which you simply need to orient and layout. And there you go. So now you'll have, let's say, seam on the back, and not everything is going to be visible. And the only thing you'll need to do is just double check how the checkerboard looks here from the frontal view. And ideally what you want to have is even squares everywhere. And that is basically everything that you're going to search for. So there's always going to be that balance in the workflow, what is more important to you, and how everything is organized in your UV tile. All right, so let's continue forward. I'm going to show you a few more examples. So let's say we now can do the bottom one. This one again would be very, very simple. So let's do a quick just planar view that we have something to work with. Go to object mode, control 1 to isolate this. And again, here really doesn't matter. So for the cylinder, like we mentioned before, we just need to have some place to create a seam, to create a cut. So I think this is going to be just fine. And then we can go here under again, cut and sew, create a cut, and under unfold, once we select our UV shell, make sure to select unfold. And then we can simply go into arrange and layout and orient shells. And also, if you wish, you can orient it manually or rotate the direction where you want to, scale it slightly, and then again, orient shells, layout, and there we go. Additionally, what you want to maybe do is optimize it a bit more, and that will straighten it just in case you have, let's say, some weird things going on. And this is going to be just fine. And maybe just scale it a bit down so that we don't have any bleedings on the top. And there we go. So this is now this part done. And this is basically now the procedure that we're going to apply for everything else. Now this part right here, let's go this one, and because what we do here is going to apply also for the top one. So I'm going to show you that real quick as well. So now this one might seem a little bit more complex, but if you follow that the same rule, so what to do and where to create cuts, again, just finding support loops and finding that sort of like depth value. And this is then going to be our cut. So in that case, let's say this is going to be that depth value here. For example, this here is going to be another depth value. Here we're going to have, let's say, another depth value, and things like that. We're going to start creating those differences between the depth. And let's now go again into the object mode and slowly start cutting this out. And let's go now into the edge mode, but first just make sure that we have any kind of UVs, because if you now start to cutting, there's actually not going to happen anything really major. So you need to have any kind of UVs, and let's just simply hit planar. It really doesn't matter which kind of UVs come here. So let's now continue, and let's see from the most easiest part, which is going to be here at the bottom. We're just going to, again, the depth value is going to be here. But first, before we do that, I would like to create a cut right here so that we have the least stretching and that we have, let's say, the proper seam. So let me just go here. one more time. So let's select everything and then create planar. So you don't have to delete it. You can just create also brand new. So you're going to see that each time you're going to get new UVs. So it really doesn't matter. You don't have to actually delete it. So let's go to edge mode, select this part, and this is going to be then our cut. So let's go again to cut and sew. I'm just going to open the tab so you can clearly see what we are using. And let's create quick cuts here. So again, this is going to be cut. Let's go into UV shell, move tool, and then push this to the side. And now we have shell that it's open. So following the same rules, so this is now going to be hidden. So it really doesn't matter where the seam is. So we can just make sure maybe that this is oriented in the middle. So we can do it like this. So what we can do is now select our shell, and when our shell is selected, you can now find your position. And for example, this might be the middle. And here you're going to see that middle too. So the only thing what you need to do is kind of like double click it here too. And then it's going to contain itself within this shell. So just double click and then going to, you can also use shift right click to access the same options like you see here. But again, I'm just using this menu right there. So create a cut, go to right click, UV shell, and then simply go to unfold menu and unfold this. And there we go. So now we have that part. Let's go into rotate mode, rotate this slightly, arrange and layout, orient shells, and then we can maybe scale it slightly, push it in, and then simply hit layout. And then it's going to snap here into position. And now we can continue now with the rest. And now slowly, as we are, let's say, creating new cuts, we will just moving more and more. Well, this space right here is going to be, let's say, our final backing area. So let's move forward. So now the next is going to be right here, for example. This is going to be the next change in depth. So let's do that. So we're going to have a selection here. Let's go under cut and sew, create a cut, right click, UV shell, move tool, push this to the side, select the UV and go to unfold. And right now, if you select unfold, you're going to have a small circle. So this now small circle means that you can leave it as it is. And then the seams will be visible only in this area. Or if you want to, you can also create, let's say, a seam right here. And then you're going to have a straight looking shell like this. But again, it's just going to be the matter of how much space you want to preserve, how important it is. Is the seam going to be of importance or you want to hide it? And there are going to be a lot of other factors in play here. But for now, just to keep things simple and to go through the tools and go through the process, we can also keep everything very, very basic. So again, let's just go to unfold one more time, optimize, and then arrange and layout and layout. But make sure that both are selected and then layout. And there we go. So moving forward. Okay, creating new cuts. So where is the another depth? Another depth, let's say, can be right here or even right here. So in order for this one to select, we actually here missed one support loop. So we can either add it now, but for now, I think we can also select this one. It'll be fine. So let's create a cut here. So let's create a cut, go to right click UV shell. And again, just continue moving this side, and now this one is going to be selected, moving it to the side. And now again, this one we're going to treat again as a brand new depth. And again, let's see where the next depth is going to be. So for example, we can select both at the same time. So let's say this one and this one. So these two are going to be our next ones. And again, cut, right click UV shell, and simply move them to the side. And once we have those selected, let's just go to unfold and push them here. And just make sure that we straighten them out, because you want to have straight shells like this. And the reason for that is you want to conserve the space, because when you have, let's say, two of them like this, they're going to take much more space. And when you even them out like this, they're going to take less space, and also they're going to cause less problems later while texturing. So just slowly moving forward. All right, so now that we have that, let's see what else is left. So we're going to continue again, same procedure. Here is going to be our next depth. Here is going to be the next one. So let me just actually select this all. So here's going to be one, here's going to be another, and let's say here is going to be the third one. So we can select all of them at the same time and simply go and create cut. Create. Okay, so cut and sew, cut, and let's go to right click, UE shell, and again, move tool and push this to the side. And now we can push these to the side just to separate them all. And once we have that, we can select all three and simply hit unfold. And again, the same process, just make sure that we straighten these out. So we can also go to orient shells or manually rotate. So orient shells, rotate or orient shells. And again, one more time, let's go to unfold, select all of them and simply hit layout. And then we're going to pack them together in this one space. And now the same procedure. So you notice it's very repetitive and we're just continuing doing the same process over and over again. So in itself, the UV process is not that complex, I would say. It's just that will take maybe a bit more time. And let's say create cuts here. Let's say separate all of this, for example, everything. For now, just for the sake of practice, we're gonna create everything what has depth, but later, let's say when you're more comfortable with all, you will also notice that some parts you can skip and something will still unfold nicely. So just again, for the sake of practice, we're also going to just look for that difference in depth. So again, let's create a cut. Cut, right click, UE shell, move tool, move this to the side. And all right, so now what we can do is just select all of them and hit unfold and make sure that we have, let's say, this one selected, and did we miss anything? So we have this one. All right. And let's select everything here and go to unfold and range and layout and layout. So there we go. Already established because this selection is already another UV tile. Actually another UV that we already established. So that's one part. The another part is going to be, again, the big change in angle is going to be right here. And again, just double click everything or simply select manually from where do we want to have our cuts. So again, click once and then, oops, so yeah, click once and then double click here and then go all the way around till here and then close it on this area. Actually, okay, that we now have selected. So the same thing now on the other side. If you want to, you can also work with symmetry here. I forgot to turn it on. And then you don't have to select all these parts separately. All right, so there we go. So now we selected every single thing. Okay, here I forgot something that actually need to be cut out. And then everything now here is going to again become a new shell. So the reason why we did exactly that, because again, this is a huge difference in angle. So here and here, and then it's also looking decent and very flat. So it's going to be very easy to unfold. So let's create a new cut, go to use shell, move this now to the side, and now we see what we are getting. So now when we have more shells, you can always isolate and then you can see, for example, what results we are getting. So did I forget here something? Let me just undo here. Let me just see, yeah, okay, so here I forgot one. So we can push it here, select everything and just pack it together. And we have one more piece here left, which control one to isolate. And now if you want to, again, search for new angles, but I'm sure that this one, okay, so next big angle is actually going to be this one right here. So we're going to need to select this and this, create another cut. And I think now you're slowly getting to understand what is the whole process here. And it's very straightforward. The only thing it might be slightly time consuming. And the same thing, let's now find a nice place for a seam, and it's going to be these two places. So the easiest is just going to be to create a camera-based UVs here. So select the shell, create camera-based, push it to the side, and now we can easily from here select the cuts. So we don't have to worry selecting the whole loop. All right, so let's create a cut and then UV shell and then unfold, unfold. And again, make sure to orient shells, select everything and lay out it all together. And these two parts are the circles on the inside. So let's just also unfold them and lay out all together. And there we go. So now the thing is, this one, for example, at the bottom, let me see here. So there we go. Now I have everything here selected, and this is stopping on a seam. Just make sure that everything is stopping on a seam like that. And now we can do exactly the same thing. Let's just cut, right click, UV shell, push this to the side. And now we can also see when we control one, isolate, we can then see the remaining shells, and then we can easily, let's say, work further. So here, what we need again is just to find one cut here. So this is again behaving as a cylinder, and we're just going to need to create, let's say, one extra cut. So this is going to be relatively simple. And then we're going to have this part, control one to isolate. So here what we need to do is still again search for the next big angle, which is going to be the angle on the top. So that's also not going to be that as complicated. And then let's see the result, what we have here. So I'm just going to select this one and control one and isolate. So this is now our new shell, and we can go simply to unfold, and here too, unfold. And what we can do is just orient shells, and again just making sure again that they are rotated more or less in the same direction, and then we can all select everything and just lay out them together. Then we have only now two pieces left. So let's start with this one, and this one it should be pretty easy. So we only need a cut here on the back. So if we're now searching for exactly this cut, and here we cannot see it good, we can always select the UV shell and create new UVs, which will be camera based. Push this to the side with the move tool, and now we can clearly see where that connection is. So if you double click here, it's going to be exactly the same thing as you double click in the viewport. The only difference is that now when you double click in the UV editor, the section is going to exactly be contained within this UV shell. So we can create a new cut, go to UV shell, and then unfold. And there we go. Orient shells. And then let's try and pack it all together again. So the thing is now, for example, if one shell is being too big, what you can do always is, again, just create much more smaller parts of it all. So let's say create another cut in the middle to optimize some space, for example. So let's say create a cut in the middle, cut, UV shell, and then unfold again and unfold again. And now we're going to have two smaller cuts just in case, let's say you have like large pieces or something like that, and then lay out together, and then it's going to be better optimized. And the same thing, for example, now with the circles. If you wish to, let's say, create more space, you can also find where the circle is for example, it's right here and the seam actually matches, you can also create a cut there. So let's say create a cut, go to UV shell and then unfold that and maybe try to straighten it with straighten shell, and then go to UV shell again and straighten UVs. And now it's pretty small, but when we select everything and go to layout, it should even itself out. Also, what we can do is just rotate it and orient shells. And if you want to, we can also layout along U or layout along V and then hit layout one more time. And then everything is going to be aligned into one row. All right, so that is it. And we have one more piece left. And that is going to be the top one. And again, where is going to be the big change in angle? It's going to be right here. So again, just making sure that we are selecting only the parts that are hitting existing shell. So it's going to be this part right here. And then let's create another cut. Go to right click, use shell, push this to the side, and then we can select this one and simply hit unfold. And again, let's just rotate slightly, make sure to orient the shell so that it's actually either vertical or horizontal and not under an angle like this. So we can push it here, select everything and just pack it together. And we have one more piece here left, which Control 1 to isolate. And now if you want to, again, search for new angles, but I'm sure that this one, okay, so next big angle is actually going to be this one right here. So we're going to need to select this and this, create another cut. And I think now you're slowly getting to understand what is the whole process here. And it's very straightforward. The only thing it might be slightly time consuming. And the same thing, let's now find a nice place for a seam, and it's going to be these two places. So the easiest is just going to be to create a camera-based UVs here. So select the shell, create camera-based, push it to the side, and now we can easily from here select the cuts. So we don't have to worry selecting the whole loop. All right, so let's create a cut and then UV shell and then unfold, unfold. And again, make sure to orient shells, select everything and lay out it all together. And these two parts are the circles on the inside. So let's just also unfold them and lay out all together. And there we go. So now the thing is, this one, for example, at the bottom, let me see here. All right, so here, for example, we already have UVs. And let's say that I would like to then create the same UVs here at the bottom. For this one, we can either just copy this top one, because this on the bottom, let me just select both of them. I can also show you this. So let's say we have no two. So we have top and we have bottom. Bottom one does not have UVs. So we can just copy this one, go to object mode, go to move mode, and simply clone and position it there. Or simply we can select the top one, select the bottom one, and then go to modify, actually mesh, transfer attributes, and then make sure that we have, let's say, UV set to current, and attribute settings, sample space set to component, because again, component is going to work when we have two identical objects. And since we copied the one from the top, we can simply hit transfer, and then the bottom one will have the same UVs as the top one, so we don't have to do that double work. Okay, so let's now go ahead and select all of these parts. So later you will do the same thing. For example, when every single part is actually unwrapped, you would just select your main object right here and do exactly the same thing. But for now, what we're going to do is just select the top part, which we already have UVs established. So this is something that we unwrapped. So we're going to select everything and go here to layout and create a new layout. So you can also go to layout along U, lay it along V, and that will just position it properly, and then do one more layout like this, or simply pack it all in this manner. Now, additional step, what you can do is I can also show you. So for example, if you can fix few things, you can check for some texture distortions if you want to. Just see general how the texture performs. You can go here to checkerboard and enable checkerboard. And then you can actually see how the UVs are performing on each of these objects right here that we unwrapped. Additionally, you can load in a custom texture. So for example, this is going to be our material. And let's go to assign existing materials and then this little checkbox on the side. And this will open an attributes editor. And here under color, we can simply load in a texture. And here I now loaded in a random checkerboard. We can increase the size here on the place 2D texture tab. So right next to it, you're going to have file 1. And right next to it's going to be place 2D texture. And then you can repeat UVs as much as you want to. So maybe let's double this to something like 10. And there we go. So now you can see a bit more clearly how your texture is going to perform later. So the thing is, actually the goal here is to have as even squares as possible. So if we have, let's say, let me just show you on one part. So let me see. Actually, I think this one is going to be much more visible. So let's say if I increase the size here or stretch it like so, this is something that we're trying to avoid. So that we have uneven squares and not so much like stretched rectangles. So that is going to be kind of like the end goal in our case. So for example, also notice here that these squares are going slight under an angle. Also not a big deal, but this is now again just how much that extra time you're willing to maybe put in and maybe to clean up some of these shells. So for example, I'm going to show you this one. Let's say what we can do is slightly straighten it out a bit. So we're going to select one random edge here and go to straighten shell. And we can do maybe one more here, straighten shell, just to see what gives sort of like the best results. Straighten shell here, for example, and just slightly optimize this. Let's do for this one quickly too. Just some random here. Straighten shell, and let's also optimize it, and then we'll see is anything better. So now we can see that now it's slightly better. So the same thing is going to be here for this one. Let's say just straighten shell, and then we're going to just select everything one more time, go to right click UV shell and lay out it all together one more time. And then basically this is going to be kind of like your general workflow for let's say creating cuts, creating seams, unwrapping or unfolding, layering all together, and just in case, let's say you need to straighten something or let's say just reposition it slightly better. And yeah, basically that is all. Additional thing I want to mention is also just in case, for example, let me turn the texture view off. You can go under view and turn on UV distortion, and you can see actually on the surface itself, are you getting any kind of distortion, and it's going to be color coded. So red will mean stretching and blue will mean compression. That just simply means that red areas will maybe have slightly more texture stretching, and then blue area is going to have more texture compression. So unless this is like strong red, this is everything going to be fine. The true test is going to be on Subdivision preview, where you're going to see that actually the most stretching or compression in our case is going to be located between those support loops. So support loops and structural loops, and especially here, if you remember, we mentioned that we forgot to add one extra support loop like we have here on the top. So we might see a bit more stretching there, but if we turn on the UV distortion and actually preview this with the texture, and if the texture is, let's say, performing decently performing, then we can leave it. But later down the line in texturing process, let's say that you see like, let's say, serious stretching, you can always come back and kind of either add those loops or add more topology in the middle to alleviate some of those problems. But in general, so far, I think that is going to be fine just for the demonstration purpose. So yeah, this is now going to be it for now. We covered again very basics of modeling just to give us a clear idea of what tools we're going to use, what workflow is going to be. We also discussed a little bit of rendering, how we can render that initial first models, and the same thing now with UVs, just so that we understand the basic concept behind what UVs are, how to create cuts, what seams are, where to create those seams, and general unwrapping principles. And this is now going to be enough information for you maybe to evaluate or decide is hard surface something that you might be interested in. And of course, we also have, I just want to mention that as well, we have very extensive Maya masterclass on hard surface, which covers the very basic tools, basics of topology, modeling simple shapes, modeling more complex forms. We're going to model that motorbike. There's going to be a lot of assignments for you to test your skills. We're going to discuss rendering a bit more, same thing with UVs. And yeah, if you wish, feel free to check that as well. I'm going to leave the link in the description down below. And finally, I just want to express my thanks for watching the content and supporting the videos, supporting the channel. And yeah, let's close it here, and I'm going to see you next time.